Do we have anybody at City Hall, Stephen?
Me, Mel, and Mike Frizzell.
Yes, sir. Officer Crittenden.
Crittenden, okay.
Yes, sir. Officer Crittenden.
And Officer Crittenden. Hey, someone joined as iPhone 816-223-555, and I can't see the last number. Can you tell me who you are? Probably not, because it doesn't look like they joined audio.
It's Dan Lowe.
Thank you.
It's 5555.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Hey guys.
Hi, Jimmy.
How are you? I don't turn on my video because for some reason my computer just flashes and it becomes irritating.
Sure, good excuse.
Okay, I have someone who joined by telephone number 913-488-8510. Can you tell me who you are?
Stephen, it's Jeff White.
Jeff White. Thank you.
There is a council meeting tonight, isn't there? Okay. That's fine, I'm sorry.
Which one we've been to since then.
You guys will have to sit out in the lobby.
I see, okay. Just will come in and give a big old hug.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Well,
We're going to do a quick mic test of the wireless mic.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Can everybody hear that okay?
Loud and clear.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good.
They're on Zoom.
Okay, they're all on Zoom. Then
Yes.
I guess they want to stop on this.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, we are at 7 o'clock.
Good evening and welcome to the April 27, 2020 meeting of the Shawnee City Council. I am Mayor Michelle Disler. I'll be chairing this meeting. All members of the governing body are participating remotely. I'll do a roll call at this time. Councilmember Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Zimmerman.
Present.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Present.
Councilmember Kimley.
Present.
Councilmember Larson-Bonnell. Present. Councilmember Nappin.
Present.
Councilmember Constance. Present. Councilmember Chaffee. Present. Thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. United States of America.
For which it stands, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some ground rules. I want to make sure that all remote participants keep their devices muted until I ask for comments. We'll attempt to use the raise hand feature in Zoom so I can recognize you. Just like always, I'll ask for motions on each item. Please raise your hand and wait to be called on before stating the motion so we can get an accurate record for the minutes. Next, I'd like to go over some emergency procedures. Due to the COVID-19 situation, we're taking action to minimize attendance at the City of Shawnee City Council meetings. We're asking our residents to stay at home, especially if attendance is not essential, and listen to the broadcast of the meeting from our website at cityofshawnee.org. All governing meetings will comply with the Kansas Open Meetings Act. During this time of health emergency, we'll also be prudent with our business agenda, deferring action when feasible, and we will not be accepting public comments on agenda items for this emergency period unless the item is a public hearing as required by law. We'll have a limited amount of public seating where the audience can observe and listen to the meeting, however, using social distancing best practices. In the future, if you have information or comments related to any item on our agenda that you would like to have presented to the governing body, we encourage you to submit that information in writing rather than appear at our meeting. If you wish to submit information, please email those comments and statements to governing body at cityofshawnee.org. Contact information for individual members of the governing body are also on the website at cityofshawnee.org. Additionally, while we won't do a roll call vote on every vote, I will state council members' names who vote in minority, so our listening audience will have a clear and accurate record of the vote. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have an item they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those nay. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is mayor's items, and I do not have anything tonight. The next item is public items. Item number 1 is we'll receive an update on Imagine Shawnee. Imagine Shawnee is the city's strategic planning and visioning process. Mike Mowry with Strategic Governing Resources will present the final results for the vision of Shawnee. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor, and fellow council and residents of City of Shawnee and staff, and really honored to be able to present to you today the presentation on Imagine Shawnee. And I do have a PowerPoint, and so I'll try to do, okay, there it is right there. We'll have a PowerPoint of that, and just want to walk you through it. And this will be a document, of course, that will kind of be encompassed in a larger document, probably, that your staff would create, that will give some narrative, and we'll help them in developing that narrative as they want us to talk about, the city, the process you've been through, the history of your city, and acknowledging that, and that you're looking forward now to the future. So let's kind of jump into it, and we are a part of this process we call the cycle of strategic visioning. And as you know, this started almost a year ago. As we began to get input from the community, we had a number of community events, Imagineering sessions, and focus group meetings. You did surveys, and we were able to collect a lot of input from residents in the city about what they want for the vision of the future. And your staff and the steering committee just did a tremendous job in that. I can't say enough about them and the input and the residents. The people's input was tremendous in how they went about this. So I just can't say enough good things about that. We then took a time to meet with staff and really asked the staff, what do you see coming up on the horizon from your professional perspective? What do you see in terms of capacity as an organization? And of course, all of that information is material that the council has the right to take some, none, or all of it. And they did take that into account. It allowed the staff to present things in a coherent, cohesive way. And then the heart of this strategic vision has come out of the council retreat, where we spent 2 days really assimilating the material that we had received and that the steering committee had worked on, and listening to one another. I thought the council did a great job of really everyone being able to speak their own perspective, but also to listen to others and be very cooperative. And so again, council, I can't say enough about what great work I think you have done, both in listening to citizens and listening to each other and bringing great material to the table. And so now this is the aftermath or the product of that process. And then just to kind of briefly note, from here, once you have approved it, council, it will go to the staff to create a strategic plan that's in alignment with the strategic vision. We always say the strategic vision is about the direction that you're going, and that responsibility lies largely with you, council. You've taken staff input, you've taken community input, but really that's your responsibility. Now the strategic plan is about how you get there. And that is primarily, though not exclusively, the responsibility of the staff to say, okay, council, if this is the direction you want to go, here's how you get there. So we will be working with them to develop very detailed plans. As some people have said before, well, will this have more meat on the bone? And the answer is absolutely. And that will be the responsibility of the staff to develop, and in conjunction with you. And there will be a lot of give and take and back and forth. But at some point, you, the council, will look at that staff plan and say, yes, that's it. That is in keeping with what we have said we wanted. We have agreement on the price point of what it's going to cost. We have agreement on the timeline, given what our restraints and other priorities are. And then staff will have the main responsibility to execute. And then at a point from there, maybe 18 months later, something like that, it would be prudent to bring council and staff back together for a short workshop of a half day or so to really say, well, what progress have we made? What game changers have we experienced? What's gone well? What's not gone well? And what adjustments do we need to make? And of course, staff will make those adjustments. And all through this process, we're going to be getting input from the community. So that doesn't really show visibly well on our diagram, but we always like to state it because we don't mean to indicate, oh, we got community input and we're not going to get any more community input. To the contrary, you'll be getting input all the way through. So with that said, let's look at what these 5 pillars are. And as we've gone at it, we've not tried to say, okay, let's wordsmith it. Let's just look at what the big things are that hold up this vision as a city. And so the first, and they are alphabetized, not prioritized, so that we can indicate the fact that all of these things are important for the future of Shawnee that you envision. And if one of them collapses, really the whole construct suffers. So don't take this to say, well, the number 1 thing is number 1 and the number 5 thing is number 5. That's not the case. All of these things have to be worked on and can be worked on and achieved. Number 1, attract diverse housing to meet the needs of a growing city. Number 2, create a safe, sustainable, inclusive, and interactive community. Number 3, design an environment where businesses thrive. And number 4, lead in maximizing and integrating natural resources. And in 5, provide exceptional city services and infrastructure. And of course, each of these have milestones that give a little more explanation for each one and give direction to the staff about what exactly it is you're wanting them to accomplish. So those are the pillars. Let me go on unless you have questions, and we'll talk about the milestones under each one of those. All right, let's move to number 1 and just go through the milestones. And these have been very well worked on by you, by your steering committee, and I think we've got some good input here, and I think it gives good direction to your city staff. Develop a mix of housing options to serve a broad range of households and income levels. Be innovative in mixed-use developments. Revitalize needed areas with infill housing developments, and integrate multifamily housing with existing development. So those are the milestones that will help you see as a city we're moving in the right direction to accomplish the main pillar. All right, let's look at the next one. Create a safe, sustainable, inclusive, and interactive community. 6 milestones on this one. Continue to be a leader in public safety best practices. Promote health, connectedness, and a sense of belonging in every neighborhood. Develop creative partnerships to expand public transit opportunities. Make downtown a premier, interactive, and unique destination. And of course, this idea came up over and over, a very important part of your dream, I believe. And then integrate sustainability and conservation and planning to create a resilient city and improve quality of life. And again, this one came through many, many times, both from the community input and in the discussion on the council retreat. And then finally, generate opportunities for recreation, public art, history, and cultural experiences. So a very strong desire to have many nice amenities as you do and as you want to continue to have. All right, let's look at the third one. Design an environment where businesses thrive. And 5 milestones. Yes.
This is Eric. I wanted to say something on that last slide, but I don't know if we're supposed to talk now or talk later, so I just wanted to get that question.
Let's go back and talk is fine, if you have something you want to point out on it, Eric.
Yeah, just one thing, in almost every opportunity where we have a chance to talk to people, whether it's the mayor's time she spends with the folks at her Thursdays, or it's this imagineering session, I mean, you hear this constant drumbeat of what we like about our community that has a small town feel. And I just wonder why we didn't have that anywhere in here. It just kind of smacked me in the head as I was looking at this tonight, even though I didn't necessarily come up with this before. But that's been a really big deal for a lot of folks. So it seems like if we were listening to our folks and valuing their input, we probably have something that addresses that strong desire by our residents to keep that small town feel.
I think that's a good comment, Eric. I think probably the idea, and we can certainly include that verbiage, but it was probably thought to be included in that second bullet point where it talks about connectedness and a sense of belonging in every neighborhood. But we could add a comma that says maintaining that a small town feel.
Yeah, I'd like to put it in here just because it's such an integral item for everybody. It's not just a passing comment. That's something that really seems to be a very strong and pervasive deal in this community. So I think it would hurt to just come out and actually say it, so when the people are reading our pillars, they say, "Oh yeah, they remembered that we want our small town feel." I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah. I think it would fit fine to just put a comma after the word neighborhood and use something like saying maintaining a small town feel.
Yeah, I think it could be as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to make a big deal out of it, just something that actually addresses that point, which is stated so commonly and so frequently by the public. But I think we probably ought to actually just come out and say it somewhere.
Hey, Eric and Mike, sorry, this is Caitlin. I just want to clarify maybe, while I truly do appreciate that comment, and we absolutely heard it a number of times, do you think that it brings additional benefit to the items that you see on this page?
I think it brings the benefit of having acceptance by our public. That's where I think it brings value. It brings value because it makes this thing, it makes this pillar something that can be embraced more readily by our folks. And we want them to embrace it, so.
Of course. Mayor, may I ask a question? Yes, Councilmember Constance?
When we had the Imagineering session wrap up a couple of weeks ago and shared this with the public and got additional input, I'm curious whether that was a concern or whether the big picture of inclusive and belonging community feel, if the folks that reviewed that felt that that was adequate. I recall from our council retreat, we did talk about this quite a bit and how important that was, and what I remember is that we got to the bottom of recognizing that it had more to do with community belonging, involvement, necessarily than being a small town, since we do have, 67,000 people. So that's what I'm trying to wrap my mind around in this. I do understand this, what's at the bottom of the small town feel, but I remember quite a few conversations with people in getting to these 5 pillars and benchmarks. So that's my thought. And question. Thank you.
I don't really think in the wrap-up we heard any discussion about that, that it wasn't included. I don't think that you're probably going to hurt yourself one way or the other at this point on it, but...
Well, as Eric said, it's a feeling, it's a community feeling. It did come up at every single manager discussion, and it does come up every event that I host when I ask people to go around the room and introduce themselves and tell me something they love about Shawnee. It comes up every single time. And along with that, so does our history. I don't think we had hit that as strong enough as well, because it came up in our SWOT analysis as one of our strengths. And when we asked the question, what is something you hope stays the same, it came up several times. And I don't think it's to stay stuck in the past, but to make sure that we consciously bring our history into the future. I mean, we currently have an amazing parks director and museum director that does put this into all of our stuff. And we recently have a new development on the Kenneth Smith land that name themselves the Kenneth Smith Estates. We have another new development that may be coming to us that's considering a historical name. So while we have, Neil and Charlie and all these people now, in the future, someday I'm sure they're going to want to retire. And in the future, when we have a different governing body and we have a different parks director, that was something that came up at every single imaginary session. And I don't know if just putting it there in the middle of a sentence at the bottom quite captures what they were wanting to do to make sure we consciously bring our past and our history into the future.
Well stated, Mayor. This is Tammy Thomas, and I would have to completely agree with you, and thank you, Eric, for bringing that up. But in talking with people in the Ward 1, small town feel and that connectedness is extremely important. And whether I don't know what to say. I think, but when we need to state what the people state, and the small town feel is very important. And I do see where that's lacking. Connectedness is one thing, that small town feel is another.
So, would you like maybe just to add a bullet here that kind of addresses both that maintaining a small town feel even as you grow, and a connectedness with your history? Excuse me.
Sorry, it's Councilmember Larson-Manel and then you, Mr. Zimmerman.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, thank you. This is all really good conversation, and I agree the small town feel definitely does come up a lot and is important. I'm wondering if we could handle it by including it as a parenthetical at the end of the second bullet point, because I do think that the second bullet point is where we were trying to define what the small town feel is. And then to Michelle's point about history, isn't enough just including it in the last bullet point. Should we be saying we are trying to incorporate our history into as many developments as possible, as many city projects as possible? I'm not sure how to make that language smaller about how we honor and recognize our history. Because it is visioning. We're not wanting it to look like we want to stay stuck in the past. We want to bring it into our future with our future parks and developments and things like that. Councilmember Zimmerman, and then Councilmember Chowthee, and then Councilmember Constance.
I just, real quickly, wanted to weigh in on the small town feel. I think a more welcoming thing that captures that nuance would be a hometown feel. My only concern about using the word small town is really not a small town. I think a hometown feel is what people, sometimes when you say small town, what you're really thinking is a hometown feel. That's going to be a bit more welcoming.
I like that. Yeah, everybody does say small town feel, but I like that, Matt. Agree. Councilmember Chowthee?
That's exactly what I was going to say, so that is my only comment.
Okay. Good.
So, I think there might be two different ways to do that. One is you could just say for the hometown feel, you could just put that at the end of bullet number 2 that says something to the effect of maintaining a hometown feel.
Yes, I think so.
And then you could add a bullet under that says something to the effect of incorporating our history even as we move into our future. Or honoring our history even as we move into our future. That's just one thought. You guys feel free to hold on and whether it say this. Just
Councilmember Constance?
I really like the way that you phrased that with the honoring our past into the future. I really like that. And I like the hometown. I think that really conveys the sentiment.
Okay.
This is Eric, chiming in there because I brought up the small town feel. The reason I see the word small town feel is because that's the words that the public uses. And it's always the same. I don't have a major issue with calling it a hometown feel as long as that satisfies our folks and makes them feel that that's addressing that concern of theirs.
Okay.
Councilmember Knappen? Councilmember Knappen?
Sorry, I was on mute. Mike, good job summarizing some of those comments. I'm good with all of them. I'm just kind of curious about the process here. I know we spent 2.5 hours, or at least a couple hours, a couple weeks ago, really talking about the nuances of the wording here, and it was really productive. But is this our last chance to continue to do that tonight, Mike, or do we approve this at some point? Just what the...
Yeah, thanks for asking, Councilman. At some point, and I would suggest it's tonight, with the additions we've talked about here, you really need to move on and prove it so that your staff can then start creating the work plan that really fleshes it out. And while I think your comments are very good, and that's why we have more than one run at it, you don't want to spend too much more time in this process so that you can move on forward.
Yeah, Mike, I can add on to that. This is Caitlin, everyone. We have set a joint Parks and Recreation Advisory Board City Council meeting next Tuesday, May 5th.
and that will be the opportunity for the governing body to adopt both the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that we've been working concurrently on this project and these vision statements, the pillars and milestones. So to answer your question, Councilmember Knappen, this really would be the quote-unquote last opportunity to do any wordsmithing. It's gone through a number of wordsmithing opportunities, and as Mike said, we really need to get to the plan, and so on Tuesday, hopefully would be the adoption point of these statements, pillars, milestones.
Thank you for that, and just to be clear, if this is the last opportunity, I'm not trying to hurry us along, so that's fine. I was just curious where we're headed with this. I agree with all the comments that have been stated so far.
Okay, well, we'll move on then, and we'll make those changes that you have suggested, Council. I think they're very good.
Councilmember Thomas? Oh, everyone's hands down. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's move on then to number next, which I think is 3. Design an environment where businesses thrive. Identify areas that would be attractive to commercial development. Attract and retain business clusters that will create a sustainable business culture. Recruit businesses that will make downtown a premier destination. Create a corporate business park to attract additional Fortune 100 companies. And encourage parks and recreational opportunities in commercial development. So, a lot of good work was put into that. Any questions on that one?
Councilmember Larson-Benoit? As I'm reading the bullet points now, the first bullet point seems a little bit like an incomplete thought. Identify areas that would be attractive to commercial development. Okay, well then what? I'm wondering if we should add just a little bit more to say, well, at that point, we are going to do X, Y, and Z to get that commercial development here.
I think some council members may want to speak to it. I think the presumption was, and I'm not saying we shouldn't say, is that once that was identified and a part of your master plan, then obviously the second part of attracting and retaining businesses and recruiting businesses becomes a big next step for you as a council. But I'm certainly glad that if you want to add some more clarity to it.
I was comfortable with what it was, but if you've got some language, go for it.
Councilmember Zimmerman? Councilmember Larson-Benoit, is your hand up again? I'm sorry, I'm lowering it. Okay.
Any other thoughts on that question that you want to address, Council?
Yes, I got my hand up there, but it's hard for Michelle to see all the hands on this thing. I was comfortable with where it was, but I tell you, this all came out as part of that where I talked about taking a strategic look at the undeveloped areas of Shawnee with the mindset that we wanted to not only identify them, but also determine what it would take to put in place the infrastructure and try to gain some momentum for some development starting to move in those directions. So it did have a component of identifying areas and then coming up with some long-range strategic plans and goals for putting in the infrastructure to encourage the development. But that's a lot to say, and I was okay with what it says right here, quite frankly.
Can I elaborate on that a little bit? This is Caitlin. I would tend to agree with Councilmember Jenkins this being the vision, and then staff and the governing body developing a plan once this is adopted. This is a vision kind of stating that we are interested in additional commercial development.
development, and then the plan would tell us the how. So while I've also been struggling with how some of these are vague-ish statements, at least it gives staff direction regarding additional commercial development and identify where those areas would be. And then once we develop the plan, we can start to implement something along the lines of what Councilmember Jenkins is talking about, those area development plans or those infrastructure development plans. And those are the actual planning portion items that staff can bring forward then to the council for approval after this is all approved.
I do think that it points out, there's a couple of thoughts there. One is that it really points out the importance of a lot of back and forth in the planning part as we move from vision to planning, so that staff gets what you're wanting. On the other hand, one way you could do is to say, without making it too wordy, is identify areas that would be attractive to commercial development and create plans to encourage development in those areas. And so that maybe helps clarify.
And that's exactly what I was getting at. The rest of the bullet points kind of give the city direction of something really specific to do with the information.
I think I might have missed if there was any comments. My internet seemed unstable.
Councilmember Larson, Monroe? Yes, I was just saying that exactly, Mike, what you just said. It just feels like an incomplete thought, even for a visioning stage. Like we're directing staff to do half of something that we're actually wanting them to do. We don't just want them to identify the areas. We want them to identify the areas and then figure out what will be needed to attract the commercial development, not what areas should be attractive. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to get overly wordy with this. You all know my background, and this is not a legal document, so I'm not trying to.
Well, I don't think that myself. I'm sensitive to it, but I don't think it's too wordy if you just say, identify areas that would be attractive to commercial development and create plans to encourage development in those areas. And from that, to me, that gives staff the direction, but it kind of ends the thought too. If council is good with it.
Sounds good.
I like that.
Okay. Let's move on then to the next pillar, which is, I think, this is one of the real differentiators of Shawnee, and I think we really had some great discussions on this. So lead in maximizing and integrating natural resources. Capitalize on Shawnee's unique topography and geography by integrating into developments and site designs. Promote innovation and efficiency in design standards as updates are made to the comprehensive plan. Incorporate natural resource access into development and utilize the Kansas River in future recreational opportunities.
Councilmember Zimmerman and then Councilmember Knappen.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any recommendations on changing anything whatsoever, because I like the way it's come together, but just as an observation on the heels of the conversations we had on the previous slide, I think this has some of that contains some of that underlying philosophy on what we should do as we plan our community that appeals to businesses. We do these kinds of things that we see here. That's going to be part of our roadmap as to how we manage our development for businesses. So just an observation. Don't really want to change anything with this. It looks good.
Councilmember Knappen?
Yeah, so just a question here on the third bullet point, and maybe it's just jogging my memory. I remember conversations around all of the other 3 points, but give me what examples do we have of incorporating national resource access into development, if you would? It doesn't make as much sense to me.
This is Caitlin. If you remember, I don't have the exact language right in front of me, but kind of just utilizing the beauty of Shawnee and topography. I believe originally it made reference to examples like Italy and Greece when we talk about development and
Yeah,
I think we
actually have to take them out.
Yeah. So,
on the record.
Yeah, for the record, I asked to take those references out.
up with.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if we could define that a little bit better, but just a thought. I'm not going to get too hung up, but it's a thought.
Councilmember Larson-Manel? I actually think we have a really good example of this in one of our recent developments. Shire Products chose the location that they chose because they were really interested in being by the creek area and having outdoor space. And I think that it's a lot of that. How do we help these businesses tap into the topography and the local green spaces and things like that, and encourage them to have green spaces of their own on their own campuses? The co-op next to Shawnee Mission Park did the same thing. They chose their location because of the business they're in, and the park went with their business. Councilmember Chelsea and then Councilmember Constance.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I think of on this is not just commercial development, but residential development and connections to trails and access to parks. I think is huge. One of the things that I hear a lot from people, and I feel like that is sort of touched upon in that bullet point. So the more new development that we have that can connect to our outdoor recreational opportunities and our natural resources, I think is great.
For sure.
Councilmember Constance?
Just chiming in a little bit on what Jill said, I was also thinking about the development out off of Clare Road that incorporates a walking path as well as some rain gardens and different elements like that to attract people to want to live there. I think the same can be said for attracting people to, work and companies to come here just by, really playing off of that natural beauty.
So I would say, I think if you project yourself down the road 20, 25 years, Sean, if you follow this out, this is going to be one of the things that really makes Shawnee sizzle. And people will say, wow, this is a unique city. And I don't mean to say that that's not the case now, but we're thinking forward. If you don't do this, and I know you will do it, but if you didn't, you'll miss the great opportunity in front of you. And so I'm really glad that you'll have great discussion about it. And you'll be able to do things that you couldn't do before. We'll have better technology, and because you're standing on the shoulders of things that people before you have done, you'll be able to take it farther than you ever could. And it'll be very, very neat. It'll be very fun to watch what this looks like for your city. All right, any other comments on this one?
This is Neil, Parks and Recreation Director. I just want to say that we have a wonderful, I'm not going to say plan, but a vision for Riverfront Park West on that side where they're mining right now. The trails that would go into the development of the businesses to where they could utilize the park, vice versa, going out with the different amenities that we would put in there. I think this would be really corporate Rubes special of the vision that we are looking at. So down the road, I know it's going to be a while, but anyway, thank you.
Good point, Neil. All right, let's move on into the last pillar. and that one has to do with city services. Provide exceptional city services and infrastructure as the pillar. Support residents in maintaining property through safe building codes that promote new construction and renovation. Promote beautification by establishing innovative code enforcement strategies. Provide state-of-the-art stormwater systems through regional partnerships that protect residents' properties. Create a continuity of regional connections through sidewalks, paths, and trails. Grow and cultivate a workforce of servant leaders who are fully equipped and prepared to carry out the vision of Shawnee, and maintain and expand a quality road system utilizing concepts that promote efficiency and sustainability. And finally, establish an infrastructure development plan. So these were a little bit more granular, and maybe not granular, but broader, because it addresses a lot of things. But I think that this is a very significant pillar for you as well, because you have to provide these resources and these services, and if you don't, a lot of the other things that you envision aren't going to come to pass. So I think this is a very important one as well. Any thoughts or comments on this one?
Councilmember Zimmerman?
Just observation, a lot of words there, a lot of votes, but I think it's, to your point, right, it's pretty descriptive, and it covers all of the important issues that we have to deal with as city infrastructure. So even though it's a little bit wordy, the next slide is one that we've added, and that is possible moonshot ideas. And this kind of came out of, I think, the last session with the, not the staff, but the steering committee. And these are not ideas that we're putting into your 5 pillars, but these are moonshot ideas that we'll include in the report, so that you kind of see as you start moving along and getting some success, which, if any of these, might have some legs that really become, game changers. And, they may not come about, but some of them might. And I often say to organizations, you won't accomplish everything that you talk about, but you'll accomplish exactly 0% of what you don't talk about. So these are kind of some possible moonshot ideas. They're not ones that you're committing yourself to. We're just including them in the report that you have said, this is things we've heard at various parts, or at various times during the conversation. So, I won't read through Nick and Stephen.
I think the typo on mixed use residential community. We don't want to use residential community.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Councilmember Constance and then Councilmember Chelsea have comments.
When we looked these over with the steering committee, there was an additional moonshot idea that I had shared and was wondering if we could add. It has to do with really in relation to that Valley of Champions idea, incorporating, really taking advantage of outdoor recreational opportunities in that area, like the biking, hiking, the naturescape type playgrounds, camping, etc., knowing that we're really going to be attracting sports, team sports, also providing those types of recreational opportunities that work for people of all ages, past just the time where you do team sports. So I didn't really see that incorporated. I had shared it in reference to the community center space, in that land over there. Of course, it doesn't have to be in relation to that, but that was something I was wondering if we could incorporate here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
And then Councilmember Chaffee and then Councilmember Thomas.
I had two small things. Kurt, I actually really agreed when we took out the specific examples of Italy and Greece in an earlier slide a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like we sort of did the same thing here with the power and light. I love the bullet point of the downtown gathering place. I think that's fantastic. I just wonder if we want to specifically use the proper noun or the exact place that we have here in Kansas City called power and light. So I was just kind of noticing that. And then the only other comment I have is on the one about incorporating food and drink opportunities near the Kansas River. Love that, and just thought maybe we could expand that to include not just food and drink, but recreation and entertainment as well on that bullet point. Again, I know these are moonshots, so it's not like vitally important, but just thought I'd throw it out there.
I was trying to find a better way to say bar district. So thank you.
I like that. I like that, Jill.
Councilmember Thomas?
Jill, I like what you said. I can really envision some chicken and pickle down by the river. I think that'd be great. I have a little bit of concern about community center being called out as the tremendous vote response to community center, and it being in there almost says nobody's listening to the citizens. So I question that a little bit. Lindsay, to your comment about camping and Valley of Champions, I think that's spot on, and I think that should be really called out, because you go by the ball fields when the summer's going and all these folks are coming in and out of Shawnee. What do you see? You see campers, you see pop-up tents and all of that kind of thing. That would be a huge benefit to Shawnee as a moonshot idea. But I do have a concern about the community center specifically being called out simply due to the response of our voters to the notion of a community center.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good point. Any other comments on it then? We'll make those adjustments that you guys have pointed out. I think those are all good input, and as Caitlin pointed out, then we'll have the plan or the vision statement really ready for you to vote on in conjunction with the Parks Master Plan May 5th, I think it is. So any other questions from me before moving on? And Mayor, I thank you for all of your help with this, and all of you that have been such a big part of it. It's been very, very exciting to watch you work together.
Thank you for all of your help, and if the council doesn't have any other questions or comments...
I do. I have my hand up, but like I say, you can't always see everybody at one time when you're looking at the list of names. It's so long. But I was going to ask a question to Mike. I mean, somewhere along the way you were talking about linking this with dollars, and I wasn't really sure about following you when that part occurs.
Well, I think that's, we have several places where it occurs. One is you're thinking about your budget year, and you're working on budget, but primarily it's going to be, as the plan is being developed, their staff will come back to you and say, okay, here's what we're looking at, here's what we're thinking of prioritizing, did we get it right? And that's going to be a lot of discussion between council to say, no, this has got to be our first priority instead of that one, et cetera, et cetera. That's some prioritizing, and then just level of amenity, and say, can we have a level A amenity at this point, or do we need to be satisfied with a level B amenity? I can say it that way. That's where that discussion.
Yeah, because when you start getting into more prioritizing and really identifying where you want to go with some of this stuff, dollars is going to be probably the number one consideration. Can we afford it? Is it something where we just require a tax increase? Do we want it that bad? Or there's a lot of issues to be fleshed out that revolve around these projects. So
You're exactly right. And you have to make an adjustment on your timeline. Because on some points you say, well, we can do it, but we can't fund it all now. You have to do it incrementally, so your timeline gets stretched out. You work on that. The key thing is, what you're doing is you're telling the staff, this is what we envision for the city. Now, it's going to have a lot of elasticity for your timeline to be able to make it possible, because it all takes dollars and you'll have to prioritize. And so there's a lot of discussion still to be had, for sure, and it continues.
Councilmember Zimmerman?
Yeah, so no questions, just one comment. It's a pleasure working with you on this. I'm thrilled with the product as it's presented here. We've started with one council, finished with another. Listening to my colleagues, it sounds like everybody's pretty pleased. So thank you for your efforts, and my kudos to your team as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure for us to work with you so far, and we can look forward to finishing this out and helping your staff create a really good plan that's in alignment with this vision.
Nolan, did you have any comments?
Well, I was just going to bring up if we wanted to kind of talk about the community center comment. It was, kind of going back to kind of the small town feel and sense of belonging. It was something that was really brought up numerous times throughout the kind of engagement process. People asked about it. I know we've got senior center on there as well. So again, I think these are kind of moonshot ideas. I realize that, obviously we know that it was voted and got, turned down. I think if we're looking at kind of 20-year, is that an expansion of the civic center? Is that a senior center? Is that a gathering place? So what does that look like? And so I think kind of as we kind of look at kind of the full kind of 20-year plan, but it may not, and it probably won't look anything like what was proposed. But I think you'll be interested to kind of see the Parks and Rec master plan and some of those comments that we had seen, and just kind of a lot of the comments that we had received through the Imagine Shawnee process as well. And I think Councilmember Jenkins even brought up a few meetings ago trying to find those entertainment options and recreation options for that kind of that 12 to 18 or 12 to 20-year-old kind of range. And so a lot of those things kind of fit that community center type attraction. We also heard a lot just kind of going throughout is that people want quote, a gathering place. People want a place to connect with folks, kind of a place for seniors to connect, a place for teens to connect. And so it may not necessarily look like what was voted on, but kind of just larger kind of topic, kind of vision items, as you could call that, a community center, recreation center, senior center, or something like that. So I think that's why it's in there, because it was something that we heard hundreds of times, even, following the vote, and something that, quite honestly, I think most of the staff get asked about a lot, frequently, that people are wanting, and people ask about it a lot. So I think that's why it's in there, because again, these are things that have kind of come back to us, and when you kind of break it down in terms of looking at what people are asking for, it may not be called a community center, but again, they want an indoor pool, they want a unique place to gather, and so you can kind of check a lot of those boxes. So that's why it's in there. So.
I appreciate that, Nolan. However, considering the most recent vote, I think the wording, just the, senior center, yes. The community center, I think it just has a whang to it, if you will, in a simple term. And that's my hesitation with it.
For the record, that was Councilmember Thomas.
Sorry.
That's okay. Just want to make sure it's in there for the minute.
I don't think I get mixed up with other people often.
Okay, Councilmember Jenkins, and then Councilmember Larson-Manel.
Yes, thank you. I tend to agree with the comments made by Tammy. I think when you have a 78-22 plurality say we don't want a community center in a recent vote, it's kind of rough putting it in here. I don't know how far in the future you could look, but if you say, geez, I mean, at some point the old community center is probably going to get to the point where it's got to be replaced or something, but I'm not sure the verbiage we could use here, which wouldn't just make it sound like this city council's deaf to the statement made by the citizens. And there's got to be a better way of covering that.
Well, I think you could say indoor, recreation space or indoor recreation amenities. I mean, if you want something like that in there, obviously, we understand the vote and the sentiment of the public. But again, I think it's similar to one of those things about, we just didn't want to overlook it because it's something that we frequently heard about. And again, to both of your points, is it just the words community center? Because again, people talk a lot about things that a community center would have checked the boxes, but they don't want a community, it's like, they want an indoor gathering place, they want an indoor recreation, they want indoor pool, but, maybe it's not called a community center. So indoor recreation opportunities or something, we could be a little bit more generic about it, that I think would kind of meet the needs of what we heard from some of those engagement opportunities, but also maybe not have the connotation that Councilmember Thomas referenced.
Councilmember Larson-Bonnell and then Councilmember Thomas. Thank you. I agree that the term community center is 100% toxic at this point. However, I would also agree that when I was canvassing, and this was after the community center vote, there is still a lot of interest in having the concept of a community center. So what if instead of that we said something like community recreation and gathering space? So it can take a lot of different forms. Certainly the voters rejected the specific proposal that we had. They rejected it overwhelmingly, but that doesn't mean in 12 years that they would project a totally different idea that accomplishes many of the same goals. And some wanted the center, they just didn't want to pay for it. They wanted other partnerships or other type, maybe small town center. Councilmember Thomas and then Councilmember Constance.
Maybe expanded civic center, something such as that, but just the words community center, in my experience and the people that I spoke with and have talked about it many, many, many times, community center is concerned. And, it's two words, and people come in and out, and councils change, and there's all kinds of turnover, but I'm sitting here with what I know now, and the community center was not a pretty thing for a multitude of reasons, and they can be minor or they can be major, but maybe if we want to go this route of verbiage is expanded civic center.
Councilmember Constance and then Councilmember Chaffee.
I was going to just say that I liked the wording that Lisa gave. If we say expanded civic center, that's quite specific in saying that we would renovate that, which you might find that to be more expensive than other options. So I really liked the wording Lisa used. I also just want to point out that these are possible moonshots across 20 years. So, I honestly think it's okay to have, ideas in here that were shared, especially since they were shared throughout the engagement process. If a lot of people shared those ideas, I think it's okay to have it, knowing that it might take a different form in 2040 than we can imagine right now. But perhaps if we change to Lisa's wording, that might help a little bit.
Councilmember Chaffee and then Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
I was just kind of, thinking about this on a bigger picture, and I'm certainly not trying to speak for anybody who did or did not support the community center for any various reasons, but it's my estimation, and I think this is true, that most of the lack of support for the community center wasn't the idea of the community center. It was the funding of it and the funding structure. So I definitely agree, Tammy, with what you're saying, that the words are sort of toxic, whoever used that adjective. But we should keep in mind that all of these moonshot ideas that we have in here, along with all of the bullet points that we have on all of the 5 pillars, all cost a lot of money, or some degree of money. I shouldn't say all, but a lot of these things might be financially restrictive. So while I definitely understand the comments that have been said, I think that we should maybe not completely take out the whole idea, whether we reword it or anything. I'm fine with that. But knowing that really it was the funding behind that idea for a lot of people that caused them, to not support that. So we could apply that to a lot of these other moonshot ideas, but they're still in there as possibilities.
Councilmember Larson-Manel? Yes, so I did want to respond directly to the idea of an expanded civic center. I think that that's just a little bit too granular for what we're trying to accomplish. I think if we, I am supportive generally of making sure that our civic center is top rate and that we're doing any renovations that are appropriate for it, but I don't want to limit ourselves and say that that is the only thing that we are ever going to do in the next 20 years. So I'm not in favor of that. Another thing to keep in mind is that there were 19,951 votes cast in the community center election, and that is a large percentage. It's 46%, but that is out of 43,000 voters. And so I do think that what I've experienced, what I think no one has experienced, is that there is still a lot of appetite for spaces like these, even if that plan was not the correct plan, and certainly not right now. I am not proposing that we do any of this right now, but I don't want to tie our hands in 10 and 15 years. And again, my recommendation for the wording is community recreation and gathering space. Thank you.
I think that's a good way to phrase it.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, this item was for informational purposes only. We'll move on to the agenda item. I'm not seeing any more, so thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, thank you, Council.
Thanks.
Okay, item number 2 is to conduct a public hearing to consider passing ordinance numbers 3322, 3323, 3324, and 3325, modifying the Belmont Promenade Community Improvement District CID, levying special assessment for the Belmont Promenade CID, approving a second amended and restated redevelopment agreement between the city and the developer, and authorizing the issuance of special obligation tax increment financing revenue CID revenue bonds and the execution of related bond documents. On February 24, 2020, the governing body found that the revisions to the TIF project plan were not substantial changes to the original project plan, and passed ordinance number 3317 approving the revised project plan. At that time, the governing body adopted resolution number 1905 calling a public hearing on March 23, 2020 to consider modifying the Belmont Promenade CID to be consistent with the project that is proposed to be built. The public hearing was continued twice to tonight's meeting. The developer proposes no changes to the amount or term of the incentives granted. A public hearing and 4 ordinances are required. There are 6 recommended actions to consider. But I want to clarify again. For tonight, we're voting on the 2 ordinances that are related to the CID. The first ordinance approves the project modifications to the CID. The modifications are only related to cleanup of the language. So the TIF project plan matches the CID ordinance. The incentives were previously passed, and there is no change to what was already passed. The second ordinance authorizes the CID special assessments, which again provides language to clean up the dates of when the special assessments may be levied. These are the only changes to the previously approved ordinance. The CID assessments were previously passed, and there is no change to what was already passed except correction of the dates. So there are 6 recommended actions to consider. First, I will accept a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We are now in a public hearing as required by law. Representatives from Legacy Development are on the call and include Dan Lowe, Steve Beaumont, John Hanson, Rick Katz, and Heather Trower. Also on the call are Joe Serrano from Kutak Rock, City's Bond Counsel, and Jeff White from Columbia Capital, the city's financial advisor. In a moment, they'll review the actions that are under consideration tonight. After they conclude their comments, I will ask if anyone on the council has a question for them. Once questions are answered, I will ask for comments from the developer's team. When the developer's team is done, I will again ask the council if they have any questions or comments. After the council discussion, I will ask for public comments from anyone who may be physically present at City Hall. Mr. Serrano and Mr. White, please go ahead.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is Jeff White with Columbia Capital. Joe and I are going to tag team tonight and move relatively swiftly through. My part is going to be a quick overview of the transaction and some of the business terms that have changed over time, and then Joe will talk you through the key legal documents and other actions that are before you tonight. So as the mayor indicated in her initial comments, there have been no changes to the incentive package to this transaction, but we have had some changes to the development plan and some additional detail with respect to how the parties plan to implement that plan. So again, walking through relatively swiftly here, the project plan includes approximately 160,000 square feet of larger format retail space with signed leases in hands today for about 136,000 square feet of that space. In addition to the large format space, there'll be 12,000 square feet roughly of small shop retail space. There are no current tenants identified for that space. The developer will also own and operate a 31,000 square feet restaurant plaza that is expected to house multiple restaurant concepts. As you might expect fairly early in a project development, we don't have tenants currently identified for the restaurant plaza, but it does, as I indicated, the developer does plan to own and operate that facility. On the south side of the project, we now have 2 smaller pad sites, one that would host a 3,800 square foot building anticipated to be a restaurant, and an additional pad site that would host a 6,500 square foot, roughly speaking, building also intended for restaurant use at this time, although that could be other commercial use. Those 2 pad sites are intended to be developed to shovel-ready by Legacy Development, the developer, and then sold to third parties for vertical development. So third parties are anticipated to own and operate those facilities. And then the last piece of the development, as you know, is an apartment complex. We have a modification in that, as you're aware, through rezoning actions along the way and conversations about this. The developer anticipates, again, selling a prepared horizontal site to a developer called JPL Development out of St. Louis. The purchase and sale contract between Legacy and JPL calls for 140 to 170 units of multifamily housing. We're currently modeling that at 146 units at that location. The total project costs for Legacy are approximately $51 million plus a developer fee of $1.5 million. Of that $52.5 million, just shy of $29 million will be provided through a commercial bank loan, roughly $19 million through the issuance of TIF and CID bonds, and the balance will be funded through the sale of pad sites and developer equity. The developer has secured a fully approved construction loan with Hawthorne Bank, and the bank reports that all approval contingencies have been met. The city will have rights to cause the bank to enforce a completion guarantee that both Dan Lowe and Steve Beaumont will be providing to the bank to ensure that the project does complete construction once started. With respect respect to horizontal work and certain of the vertical work on the north side of the site, the developer's contractors have provided guaranteed maximum price contracts, as well as performance and payment bonds. The developer has secured site control through the acquisition of purchase options for all the land needed to construct the project, but it does not currently own the parcels. It will complete that acquisition concurrent with the bond sale. Developer will be obligated to construct certain public improvements within and adjacent to the project. As is the normal custom, the developer's contractor will build these to city specifications and then turn them over to the city for perpetual maintenance. As far as timing goes, the developer is obligated to use commercially reasonable best efforts to complete the project by specific dates. So for the retail on the north side, the large format retail on the north side by the end of December 2021, and then for the rest of the project components a year later by the end of December 2022. One important note is that I mentioned the capital stack here. The funds available to finance the cost of the project include a bank loan, which is effectively ready to go, and the issuance of bonds, which is on the approval of which is on the agenda tonight. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing COVID crisis, there is no market for these bonds at this point, and I'm sure that Dan Lowe and his team will talk about the timing of being on the council agenda tonight with respect to providing assurance to potential tenants that the project is continuing. So we're asking you as part of tonight's actions to approve what's known as a parameters ordinance or resolution, which allows the bonds to be issued in the future subject to certain terms and conditions if market conditions warrant. As I noted at the top, the incentive package hasn't changed. The council's previously agreed to provide a comprehensive incentive package that includes tax increment finance capturing 90% of incremental property taxes and 100% of the city's 1 cent general purpose sales tax. The imposition of a community improvement district, which would have a sales tax within the district of 1.6%, that's an additional tax. And then also the levy of special assessments across the entire project, totaling $265,000 a year. Finally, the council will be asked to approve an industrial revenue bond sales tax exemption on construction goods and materials. On the agenda tonight is the approval of amendments to the redevelopment agreement. So redevelopment agreement is in place, but required changes to reflect a couple items. One is the change in the development plan, and then number two was actually a return to finalize some details that we knew we would need to finalize along the way. So key changes are, as we talked about a second ago, the apartment component of the project is materially smaller, declining by approximately 100 units from the last plan, and the apartment developer is now identified as JPL. The mixed-use retail associated with the apartments has been replaced by the new pad site, which is intended to house that 6,500 square foot restaurant or other commercial user. And we removed from the development agreement details related to the release of the bond proceeds to reimburse the developer for qualified TIF and CID costs, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The development agreement does provide a list of items that conditions precedent that must be met before the city would issue the bonds. Many of those are ready to go and are in place today, presuming we had a bond market that would accommodate us. One last note before I talk about the release of the bond proceeds, is that none of the developer's construction obligations are absolute. So the documents provide that the developer is obligated to use best efforts to construct the project as proposed and on time. And it's important to note that once the city issues the TIF and the CID bonds, that its remedies, if that development does not occur, are relatively limited. So hopefully, when we're able to get to the bond market and issue TIF and CID bonds in support of the project, the bond proceeds will be used at closing to pay issuance costs on the bonds, to fund a debt service reserve, which is a fund set aside in the event that that we don't have enough revenues to pay principal and interest in a year. It gives us kind of a cushion. To fund capitalized interest, which means that the bond proceeds will pay the bond's interest through the third year of the project while it's under construction. And then finally, to fund the project fund deposit, and the project fund deposit will be used for the eventual reimbursement to the developer of qualified TIF and CID costs. It's important to note two things regarding the issuance of these bonds, and I'm sure Joe will remind you as well. These bonds are what are known as special obligation bonds, which means that they are paid solely from the TIF and CID revenues generated by the project. The city has absolutely no general obligation or general fund obligation to make up debt service in the event TIF and CID revenues are short, and the bondholders and not the city are at risk for repayment on the bonds. So we close on the bonds, we fund all those accounts. There's money now sitting in the project fund. There's actually two sub-accounts within that project fund, and we'll talk about, generally speaking, how monies move from account to account, and then how they move from one of those accounts to the developer. So the funds initially hit what's called a restricted account, and they can only be moved to the second account, an unrestricted account, if they're earned through completion of specific development milestones. So we've divided the project into components: inline retail on the north, the restaurant plaza, the apartments, the pad sites. And as the developer proves up committed development in each of those areas, they have the right under the document to petition the city to move dollars from the restricted account into the unrestricted account. And then once those monies are in the unrestricted account, they can submit requisitions on a monthly basis to say, hey, we spent $1 million on site prep, here's the invoices, we're entitled to be reimbursed for that $1 million under the TIF Act or the CID Act, and the city directs the bond trustee to make payments against those requisitions to reimburse the developer for those costs. So the project or the information in your packet tonight details the timing and the terms of those releases of funds. I won't go into those in detail in the presentation, but certainly happy to come back to those in questions. Before I turn it over to Joe, just a couple notes about how the parties have agreed to kind of go into the bond sizing and the structure of the funds to be deposited to the project fund. So the first thing is that we will size and structure the bonds based upon a revenue study that is being prepared by a third-party consultant that the city has engaged. We have seen a couple preliminary versions of that report, and we'll be updating that report again right before we enter into the bond market. We're structuring the bonds to provide that if the project is built as it's intended on paper, that once it's built, that the project would provide $1.40 in revenues available for every dollar in scheduled debt service on the bonds. So that's called revenue coverage, and we're anticipating that we would structure the bonds with 1.4 times revenue coverage at the outset. The total deposit to the project fund can't exceed $19.5 million, which is the maximum amount of reimbursable costs under the development agreement. And we're structuring releases such that 100% of the releases could be made to the developer when 95% of the project revenues are assured through either committed development or completed development. In the event that portions of the project are not completed timely or are completed in a way that they don't meet the modeled expectations in terms of revenue generation, the city will have the right to take unspent bond proceeds and use those unspent proceeds after the third anniversary of the bonds to call bonds out of the market, reducing the bond sizing that's available. So Jill, with that, I'll turn it over to you to talk through the individual documents, and certainly happy to try and answer any questions from the council going forward.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, Mayor, members of the governing body. This is Joe Serrano with Tech Rock City's Bond Council. We wanted to break this down into, I like to break it down into a couple categories, maybe two and a half categories, in which you are considering tonight. Those categories being items that have, and the mayor alluded to this, items that have already gone before prior councils, and we're doing some cleanup work because of the modifications to the project description. Those items include the CID, an ordinance associated with the CID project, and the CID special assessments. The other ordinance is associated with the redevelopment agreement. And I just want to go, I'll go as quickly as slowly as you like and answer any questions, but in short, last year in 2019, there was an ordinance that approved the CID sales tax and the project amount. The estimated project amount was $90 million in that ordinance with a 1.6 CID sales tax imposition. With the modifications of the project and a revised petition that reduced the project amount to from approximately $90 million to $80,500,000, we thought it was important that we go before council to clean this up. And it's important that we go before council to clean up is because we are taking the bond transcript to the Kansas Attorney General for approval, and we are trying to avoid potential confusion or questions from the Kansas Attorney General as to if you have an ordinance that says 90, but really your project is only $80 million as opposed to $90 million, where did that come from? So the first item, the first ordinance is associated with the project modification, and it only modifies in section 2 of the prior ordinance the number approximately $90 million to approximately $80.5 million. The CID sales tax rate has not changed. The second item that for consideration in this category, which has gone before prior council, is the CID special assessments. And just for a little bit of color and backdrop behind this, the developer doesn't own the property, as Jeff alluded to, and so the property owners executed what was done as a waiver and consent that effectively said, if the developer doesn't purchase the property by date certain, which has since passed, we don't want the city to levy the special assessments on our property. So the developer has yet to acquire the property, and therefore those waivers and consents, which was the basis for that ordinance, was no longer valid. So all that we're doing for the second ordinance is to reflect that it's the same number, it's the same rate of special assessment. It's $265,000 annually or $5.3 million over a 20-year term. But because the basis for which that ordinance was approved is no longer valid, we needed to get a cleanup for that ordinance. So effectively, this ordinance associated with the special assessments will rescind last year's ordinance associated with the special assessment and then levy the special assessments in a duly manner. The third item in this category is just a cleanup or approval of the redevelopment agreement. As Jeff mentioned, there are some changes. There were some labelings. We now know what was being constructed. So it's a second amended and restated redevelopment agreement, and the ordinance associated with that is approval of the same. So those are kind of in the first category. Those are the items that have really come before council in the past, and we're trying to clean it up for several reasons, just to make certain that everybody understands what is being proposed, as well as to avoid any confusion with the Attorney General. The next item is what I would consider is new item. It's a new item, new items. It's really a bond ordinance. It's the special obligation revenue bonds that Jeff mentioned. These are bonds that will be paid from CID and TIF revenues alone. There's no full faith and credit backed of the city backing these bonds. So associated with this action item is a bond ordinance. As Jeff mentioned, it's a parameters ordinance that simply, and we're not there with the market, so we had to draft this in a manner that says effectively we need, the developer is requesting $19.5 million to fund the project fund. We're going to limit the interest on any series of bonds that are associated with this project to 7%. there's a floor of $16.5 million that will be required from the sale of the bond. And it limits the term to 22 years, which is a statutory requirement. So that is the new item that has not gone before prior council. The half, if you will, my 2.5 is the items that we have been before council. You know, we have a resolution of intent for industrial revenue bonds, but there are also ancillary documents that are associated with this project that have yet to be fully complete. I wanted to highlight a couple of them. One, which I think is a positive development for the city, is originally this was structured whereby the bond proceeds would have to be spent before construction loan proceeds of the construction loan amounts would be dispersed for this project. In working with the lender and the developer, that we need to work on what we call a simultaneous or pro rata release, so that the bond proceeds are not first into the market and first into this development. So there's a document that we'll need to work through, which is we call a master funding agreement, that has not been drafted, and it's just in the works. As I mentioned, the industrial revenue bonds, or the IRBs, we have a resolution of intent associated with that. We will, at some point in the future, have bond documents presented before council for the issuance of industrial revenue bonds solely for the purpose of obtaining the sales tax exemption on construction materials used in this project. So those are the items that are before us. In detailing a couple of the documents, Jeff already alluded to the redevelopment agreement. He's talked about the bond holdback and release agreement, which is really what we've been referring to in the vernacular as the escrow agreement. Presenting your packet of forms of documents that include the trust indenture, which really governs the administration of the flow of funds once bonds are sold. So it's a base document. It's a trust indenture with Bank of New York Mellon. The other important documents, they're all important, but the other documents in the packet include the continuing disclosure agreements. There's a continuing disclosure agreement associated with the city, has ongoing continuing disclosure obligations, mainly to report if there are problems or what we call material events, as listed in the SEC rule. The city will enter into that agreement with the dissemination agent, and the dissemination agent is Columbia Capital with Jeff White's group. And the final document, or two other documents, the bond purchase agreement, as Jeff mentioned, these bonds will be sold to our underwriter. We will enter into an agreement with the underwriter when the bond market is ripe for sale, whereby under the terms and conditions therein, we will offer for sale and contractually obligate a sale between the underwriter and the city. And the final document, which is a very dense document, and we may have mentioned this in our agenda packet memo, is the preliminary official statement, or POS. That is a document that discloses and describes the project itself, the risks that are inherent with these types of bonds, a little bit of element associated with the city. And it really is the document that goes what we call out on the street or to bond investors to review, to see if they want to if they want to buy on the secondary market these bonds. So that's kind of the culmination of 4 years of work, kind of wrapped up in a 20-minute session. As you know, we've been working on this for quite some time. We are happy to answer any questions. There's an awful lot of information here, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have associated with the process or associated with any of these documents and what's included there. So I stand for questions with Jeff, and we welcome anything that you have. Thank you.
Does anyone on the council have any questions for Mr. Serrano or Mr. White? Ms. Chaffee and then Mr. Kimley.
I wanted to clarify the dates that Jeff mentioned kind of toward the beginning of his remarks about the deliverables with the construction with the actual buildings. Could you repeat that?
So the redevelopment agreement provides that the inline retail with the large format retail on the north side of the project will be up and running by the end of 2021. And then the requirement is that the other components be complete by the end of 2022. I will tell you and I'm sure the development team can provide more color here, that it's their hope that everything comes online more or less simultaneously, but they have more stringent timing requirements with respect to leases that they already have in place with respect to the delivery of that inline retail on the north side.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kimling and then Councilmember Thomas.
Yeah, I'll start with a process question. After we close the hearing, there's 4 items it looks like we're voting on. Do you want us to discuss all those now, or do you want us to do it as we're voting on each item?
Probably be best to do it on each item, I would think, so that things don't get confusing.
Okay, I'll hold my comments in until we're at the individual items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Thomas?
There we go. You had mentioned that the developer would pay the TIF and the CID, but what happens if the TIF and the CID are short? Is the developer going to pay that? Because the city of Shawnee, you indicated, was not responsible. So if there is a shortfall in the TIF and the CID, who pays that?
It's Jeff Wade again. So at closing on the bonds, and at the same time we'll be closing on the bank financing, and probably closing on the acquisition of the land more or less at the same time. Presuming that the bond proceeds are sufficient to kind of fill the bucket of sources that are required to move the project forward, then from that point forward, the bondholders are actually taking the risk that the project performs or not. And so
if the bonds are not sufficient?
Yeah, so if the bonds are not sufficient, then the parties are faced with 2 choices. And the development agreement provides that either can look at the bond proceeds that are available and say, that's not sufficient, we're not going to proceed. But honestly, really, it's in the developer's camp at that point to say they're either going to maybe get what's called a mezzanine bank loan, so additional commercial debt, or maybe an additional equity contribution or something along those lines to kind of fill the hole that's required to allow the project to proceed.
So, but we could potentially be in litigation, is that right?
No, I think the parties clearly contemplate that we could have done all of this work and asked you to approve these items tonight and get to the bond market and fall short of success. In a case like this where, you look at that site today and there hasn't been a shovel full of dirt that's turned yet, we're going to be going to the bond market and asking investors to buy a vision of what this project can be at the end. And we have certain protections to allow it to proceed. But we may get to the bond pricing and determine that we just can't generate enough cash from the bonds to allow the project to proceed. And at that point, we either fold the tent and go home, or potentially a developer looks at a plan B and we come back and attack it another day.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Knappen and then Councilmember Kimling.
Yes, mine was a process question as well. I had the same one that Mr. Kimling had, which is now the time to discuss, so we're going to do each one. So thank you for that. My other question, process-wise, was, is Legacy going to present as well before we have that broader discussion?
Yes, they're next. These questions are for Mr. Strong and Mr. White, and then Legacy will be presenting next.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kimling and then Mr. Jenkins.
My question is probably better suited for the developer, so maybe I should hold mine until after they speak.
Okay. Mr. Jenkins?
Yeah, I just want to confirm with Joe and Jeff, if my numbers are correct, but really understand it. In 2017, this project was presented to City Council for approval of the TIF and CID and the whole package, and it was presented as a $98 million project. And of that $98 million, the developers were seeking $19.5 million and various assistance from the city, mainly that being the CID and the property tax abatements, the IRBs, and the other benefits that went with this package. Well, in 2019, the project was no longer $28 million, it was $90 million, and still they were looking for $19.5 million in incentives. Now we're down to $80 million, and they still want $19.5 million in incentives. And I have a little trouble with this, reconciling why the risk to the developer continues to go down, and the risk to the taxpayers of the city, of what they're giving up in terms of foregone revenues and so on, has stayed the same. So I kind of have a trouble favoring a CID where it stays the same. In other words, we put in the modification, and send in the modification, and it talks about how the project has gone down to $80 million. That's all well and good, but why isn't there an accompanying reduction in the amount of the CID? So I'm having some real problems with that. Am I on target with that? Is those numbers correct?
Madam Mayor, it's Jeff White. I'll start there. Joe, jump in if you have anything to add. Your math is right. I guess the comment I would give is we effectively have multiple developers in this project, and really always have. Legacy had never intended to be the developer on the apartment project, and instead had really wanted to focus on its bread and butter, which is the retail commercial on the north side of the project. So even though the total project costs are lower than they were last time you saw this, it is substantially all due to the result of the apartment component of the project being smaller. The horizontal cost, the cost of getting the site prepared for that apartment complex to be developed, as well as the rest of the project, hasn't changed in cost. So the impact to Legacy's kind of rate of return as a horizontal developer to the project has not gone down, even as the total cost of the project has gone down. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but I also still have a problem with that, because they presented this project to us as that they were investing $98 million. They did not separate the projects out, so when they were selling their costs on this project and seeking some support for the project, they presented the entire amount as their cost. Okay, once they got the vote that, yeah, okay, we got the $19.5 million commitment from the city, next thing you know, they're divvying it up. It's not the same anymore. So we were presented one thing, and now we're being told a different thing. So I find that to be kind of, I don't know if it's really inappropriate or what the word would be to use for that, but certainly misrepresented it to us in the beginning if that's the case.
Okay, does anyone from the developers team have any comments? It looks like Mr. Lowe has his hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you're quiet.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that we've never once from the commencement of this project indicated that we would be the developer of the residential component of this project. We have never developed residential, never have, and likely never will. It's not in our wheelhouse, and we certainly never proposed in this project that we would be the developer of the residential. Perhaps we spoke past one another, or perhaps there was a misunderstanding, but we never, certainly never suggested that we would be developing the residential here.
Mr. Hanson?
Yes, Mayor Bristler, members of the council, city staff, and members of the public, good evening. My name is John Hanson, Managing Director of Integrity Realty Resources, with offices at 1901 West 47th Place in Westwood, Kansas. My firm represents the developer as its public finance consultant. I'm joined by Mr. Lowe, who you just heard from, Managing Principal of Legacy Development, Heather Trower, Chief Development Officer of Legacy Development, Steve Beaumont of Beaumont Commercial Services, and Rick Katz of the Rick Katz Law Firm, legal counsel to the developer. Our team stands ready this evening to answer any questions that you may have, of course, but I have a few opening comments here. And on behalf of our broader team, we just wish to thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council, for consideration of this important item before you tonight, which will allow the Belmont Promenade project to move forward to the next step. In any project of this magnitude, there are a great many parties and stakeholders at the table. In addition to the city and developer, those stakeholders include tenants, lenders, landowners, potential bond investors, contractors, and more. Decisive action in support of the measures before you tonight will send a message of certainty about the city's continued desire to see the project succeed in a time that we find ourselves in of unprecedented uncertainty. Before you tonight this evening, as Mayor Disler opened and as Jeff White, Joe Serrano elaborated on, there are 4 items that have been described to you, and I just wanted to walk back through those and highlight just a couple of things in addition to the comments that were previously made. First, the CID modifications. These are companion changes to the CID and are the same cleanups that were done to the TIF project plan on February 24th, and that were approved unanimously by the council. The council further stated and agreed on February 24th that the changes were not substantial, and therefore the changes to the CID that you'll be considering tonight are not substantial as well. The second measure before you has to do with the CID Special Assessments. This simply allows us to implement this particular tool that's been considered in all of the redevelopment agreements that have been before you. There's no change to the amount, either per year or in total, or the number of years in which the CID Special Assessments are to be applied. These CID Special Assessments are a tax, an assessment on the developer's land themselves, payable by the landowners, i.e. the developer. The third measure before you, the second amended redevelopment agreement, again cleans up some of the detailed changes between the projects. I do want to address Councilmember Jenkins' comments just a moment ago. Throughout this process, we have worked very closely with the city's financial advisor, first Springstead and then Columbia Capital, through the several-year process that we have undertaken here, and have always been very forthright with respect to the financial details. Going one step further back, when Councilmember Jenkins mentioned the original budget for the project was actually $60 million, when there was no multifamily project and there were simply pad sites to the south of the new contemplated 66 terrace. The requested incentive at that time was still $19.5 million, and we were pleased in the second major iteration of the project to bring forth the concept of residential into the project, at which time Councilmember Jenkins' number is accurate that the total project budget increased to $98 million. Then as the number of apartment units declined over subsequent submissions to the city, it went from $98 million to approximately $90 million to now approximately $80 million. And that is solely reflective of the expenditures to be made on that multifamily piece of the development, of which Legacy Development, the developer of record for this project, has never been a part of, as being clarified.
So the ratio of $19.5 million to the developer's investment has not changed, but we have had multiple iterations of total project costs that differ. At each one of those stages, the financial advisor to the city was made fully aware of costs to be incurred by the developer and costs to be incurred by others, as we call it, other developers in the project. And we pride ourselves in being very forthright with respect to that. And you hire good financial advisors in your community, and they ask tough questions and answer those tough questions, and they've been informed as to the amounts throughout. So this third item, second amended RDA, cleans up some of the project descriptions. The incentive remains the same in 19.5. There is no city backing of the bonds. There are substantially similar rights and obligations of the developer and the city. I do want to point out a couple of things, a couple of very key assurances that the city will have that some of the prior comments by Jeff and Joe made me think of and want to highlight. And that's the completion guarantee and payment guarantee of the developer for the project. Number one, the completion guarantee. There's a completion guarantee to the lender on the project and a completion guarantee to the city itself, guaranteeing that the project won't start and then stop, but will be fully completed. Secondly, there is a repayment guarantee to the lender, providing proportional guarantees of the principals of the project, Dan Lowe and Steve Beaumont, to repayment of the amounts to the lenders. So, significant commitment there and skin in the game for the project overall. Finally, before you, the bond ordinance. There's a host of documents, as you saw in your packet. Many of them usual and customary bond documents. I won't repeat the description of those documents. Joe did a nice job of overviewing those. We're happy to answer any questions from our perspective that there may be with respect to those documents. So, in closing of our opening comments here, all the details about the measures before you are included in your agenda packet, and our development team stands ready to answer any other questions that you may have. We really want to take the opportunity to thank you, council members, Mayor Dissler. We also want to thank your staff and advisors for their hard work in getting all this information ready for tonight and the work that they've put in over multiple years as we've brought the project to this point. We want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and respectfully request your affirmative vote on the four measures before you for the Belmont Promenade project. Thank you, Mayor Dissler.
Thank you. Councilmember Kimling, and then Councilmember Nappen, and then Councilmember Constance.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Mr. Hanson. I'm kind of curious, the completion guarantee, what does that look like if the CID, the TIF, or the bonds don't bring in enough revenue for the developer?
Thank you for the question. So, the completion guarantee has to do with the construction of the project. Bondholders will take on the risk that the TIF and CID revenues are sufficient for them to be repaid over the term of the bonds. That's customary for a special obligation bond. That is the investment and the risk that investors want to take in the project in return for a return of their investment and interest rate. But no party, the city, the developer, anyone else involved in the project, does anything other than promises to bondholders that if and when revenue is produced, TIF and CID revenue, that it will be transferred to the trustee for application to those bonds. So the bondholders who are large, qualified institutional buyers, who
who run high yield bond funds and other type of investment funds, primarily, are taking that risk. They're bringing capital from outside the Kansas City area, mostly. Most of these companies are headquartered in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, etc. They're bringing capital from outside into this project in Kansas City, expecting to have a return of their dollars and earn interest. But they're bringing real private investment from outside the community into this project, and they are at risk for repayment.
Right, and thank you for that explanation. I guess I was getting at something a little bit different, which was, I guess I want some form of assurance from the developer that if these projections fall short, that we're not left with a partially completed development.
So the revenues will, at the outset of the project, bondholders will determine whether there are sufficient projected revenues in order to provide $19.5 million or some other number. And as Jeff White mentioned, there is no assurance as to what the number is that bondholders will say they will apply for this project. They'll look at the facts at the time, look at the interest rates at that time, etc. So the developer is bringing the rest of the capital to the table through a loan commitment through its lender, and then other developers for the apartments, which is JPL, and other third-party developers will come and bring capital for those pad sites. So we have a good reason to believe that we have a full capital stack assembled here. We need the bond market to settle and come back to us to something like what it was toward the end of the year in order for us to have a highly successful bond issuance. But one thing that's important to note is that the capital stack must be complete at the start of the project. All the dollars have to be assembled and ready to go to make the project fully successful. Nobody wants to start. The developer doesn't want to start. Lenders won't start. Bondholders won't fund into a project that doesn't have sufficient funds at the outset.
Okay, yeah, that gets to what I was asking. Thank you.
Councilmember Nappen and then Councilmember Constance.
Yeah, I've got a comment and then I've got a question. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hanson. General comment, I know it's kind of been shared that this is basically just a cleaning up of the documents, but effectively, I just want to point out, and I'd ask Ellis or Mr. Serrano to correct me if I'm wrong, our legal counsel, but effectively, because of the proposed changes, this really requires this council to reapprove, or if you will, ratify what the previous council did. So that's just kind of a statement, unless I'm wrong. But to follow up on Mr. Kenley's comments or question and ask directly, you kind of answered it directly, Mr. Hanson, but I guess my question is, you say the capital stack has to be there for either side to want to move forward, and I understand that. My question, and one of my two concerns is that there is no market for the bonds right now, obviously. So, it's possible, but not necessarily likely, that there will be by the specified July 1st date. So my question, I guess, for you and for Legacy, if we can't price the bonds by July 1st, by that date, where does that leave you in the status of this project at that point? We're going to do, and thanks for the question, and again, this is John Hanson for the benefit of all. We will continue to do what we've done time and time again for this project, which is to try to explain to every good idea, strategy that we can collectively bring to bear from the city team, from the developer team, from all stakeholders that I mentioned in my opening comments, to try to make the project be a success. There is very good reason to believe that the bond market will come back. no one can address the council. No subject matter expert could be brought in to state precisely when and to what degree. That is something that will evolve, that we'll keep a very close eye on, that your actions tonight, if affirmative, will allow us to be poised and ready to take advantage when the market does come back to us. So we don't know how long. There is a July 1st date in the redevelopment agreement. If that date comes and goes, we will continue to do what we've done over the last 4 years, which is to work together with the city team to try to figure out, again, what can we do to keep the project alive, to keep the project moving, to position it so we can move forward. We will continue doing that. There's always a limit. There's always some point at which someone will say, this just isn't going to happen, but we are a pretty optimistic crew over here on the development team. I think you'll find most developers are like that. We are confident the market's coming back. No one can say with certainty when. If we come to July 1st and we've got challenges to face, we'll roll up our sleeves together in a partnership-like way that we've worked throughout this process. And I'm sure the partnership-like way that the city would work with us, we'll continue to work and try to find solutions.
Okay, so first of all, I completely agree. Obviously, the bond market will come back, but I was concerned about that July 1st date, and so that's a good, clear answer. I appreciate it.
Mayor, this is Joe Serrano. I want to address Councilman Knappman's question associated with the ordinances for consideration. If I may, and I apologize. I don't know how to raise my hand on the Zoom, so I apologize. The answer is, yeah, this is, while I don't want to discount what the phrase is cleanup. Each item, while it is addressing the modifications to the project, you can liken it to ratification, but it is a separate item. If it's not approved, if it's not moved forward, that's a separate independent vote. So for each one of these 4 ordinances presented, while we say cleanup for 3 of them, yeah, it is a cleanup for what we're trying to get accomplished based on the modifications, the iterations to the project, but it is a separate independent vote on each one.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Constance?
Thank you. I want to make sure I understand something that was referenced earlier. I know Councilman Jenkins referenced the decrease in the overall value of the project or worth from $98 million to $80 million across the last few years. Is the reason for that we went from retail to mixed use and then from the mixed use to the decrease in number of apartments by 100? Is that the reasoning for that decrease?
That's correct. This is John Hanson again. That is correct, and I'll just mention that initially, the original redevelopment agreement budget in 2017, I just pulled it up, was approximately $60 million, and that, as you correctly pointed out, that was prior to a concept of there being multifamily south of 66 Terrace. So the project was first envisioned to be a $60 million project, all retail and commercial. So primarily retail, restaurant pad sites, an office/retail building in the southwest corner. That was $60 million.
Okay, so 60 to 98, and then eventually to 80. And then my second question was the reason for dropping 100 units, did that have to do with more resident feedback about the density and the configuration, or did it just have to do with the preference of JPL, or was it a combination of both?
I'll take a shot at that and then invite anyone else from the developer team to chime in as well. There's multiple factors. So as this council knows, there was a very strong neighbor opinion about the size and configuration, density, setback, etc. of the apartment / mixed-use project along the way. So factoring in those limitations that occurred through the planning process, looking at the market, looking at the remainder of the site once you achieve the setbacks, the height limitations, etc., a combination of those physical constraints and JPL's preference for the project, including them looking at a detailed study of the market, they resolved that approximately 150 units, the exact number is 146, that went through the most recent planning process. But they felt most comfortable at that 150 unit level based on all of those factors combined.
Thank you. That really clarifies my question. Appreciate it.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments from the council, does anyone from the audience have, hello?
Can I raise my hand? I'll raise my hand again.
Burn that then, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
Okay. Again, this might be better once we get to the initial or the independent decisions, but just to make a couple of comments, if I can just take a minute. I got to be honest, I've struggled with this quite a bit. One of my concerns was the bond market right now, and we talked about that. The other one is just the overall extent of the incentives being offered. I voted for the 20-year TIF. I'm not a big fan of CIDs just because I do think they're largely a hidden tax. That said, so those are my two big concerns, and this is a fairly large CID, which is a 1.6%. That said, I probably wouldn't have voted for it. On the other hand, I've got to say, I do think there's something to be said for good faith. Elections matter, I guess, but on the other hand, I know that the previous council did approve this, and a significant amount of investment has been put forward by the developer. And I think that's important to take into account. I also want to say that I've had several residents contact me and voice their support of the project. Folks in Shawnee, really across Shawnee, I think, want more restaurants. They're excited about the possibility of having a Dick's in Shawnee. I have some reservations, especially during this time with COVID. I do hate to turn away or discourage developers from investing in our community. And I do think it's a tough piece of land, to be honest, topography-wise, which is why I was okay with the TIF to help the developer out. So I'm initially inclined to vote against it, quite honestly, but on the other hand, there's a lot of reasons to vote for it. I do think it brings us significant value to the community. That's an important intersection, and we want to right in the middle of our city, and it's got a lot of promise. So last thing I would just say, taking all this into account, I guess instead of just voting no and possibly getting overvoted, I'd like to try to address one of my biggest concerns, which is the idea that CIDs are basically a hidden tax. And I guess I'm curious if it's possible for me to propose or to put a motion forward to put a couple provisions into place to make it more transparent to our citizens and for taxpayers that maybe require a 8x11 size sign on the front window of any restaurant or retail space explaining the 1.6% tax, or requiring cash registers within that district to explain the tax. If I'm able to make a motion to increase the transparency around it, I'd like to make it better instead of simply voting no. So I just wanted to throw out those things and see if there were additional comments from my fellow council members. I just think we need to be as transparent with taxpayers as possible.
Well, first, I would like to consult with the city attorney to see if that can even legally be required, and then I always want to accept audience comment before I accept any motion.
Sorry, Mayor, I couldn't hit my mute button very well.
My recollection is last time we spoke of this with Joe and his staff, we had made a determination that we couldn't find a way to do that, and if we did, that the residents were not going to be the residents. Yeah, the merchants were not going to be happy with it. If Joe is still on, didn't we review this sometime maybe in the last 2 years?
Yes, this is Joe Serrano again. We did review it. I'd have to go back and look at that a little bit further, but I think we concluded that it was a difficult proposition. Not only it may have been based on the tenant's concern as opposed to a planning or other item concern. I'd have to go back and look at that a little bit more carefully. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me.
I don't either, and that was my recollection as well. I can't answer that question honestly.
It's not necessarily that legally we couldn't do it, it's just that the tenants wouldn't like to do it.
We would have to revisit that a little bit. There was a legal issue associated with that, with posting that. I think the cash register, what is reported on the cash register receipt has been vetted and is okay. I think a sign in the window, there were other ancillary concerns. Again, this is Joe Solano. I apologize for not announcing. But I think there's some ancillary concerns legally with respect to that sign.
Yeah, I couldn't remember clearly, but I know when we did the other CIDs, there was some reason, but I can't remember specifically why it was that it couldn't be posted.
Well, just as a comment, it seems odd that you can require it to be on a receipt and not require it to be on a cash register. I don't understand that.
Kurt, I'm sorry again. This is Alice. My recollection is it had something to do with the required notice, and the required notice being or constituting what was on the receipt. And I'm trying to find anything I have in my records here about that prior discussion, or maybe something from the state, the revenue department, or somebody that may have had an input on that previously as to whether or not we could do anything beyond what was required to be put on the receipt.
Well, transparency is, I think, it's one thing to just vote against it. If it's going to go through, transparency for taxpayers is an important item, and I just think that we need to, I guess I'm surprised there hasn't been more discussion around it.
There was. We have other CIDs within the city, and there was previous discussion, but then it was determined for whatever reason that it seems none of us can quite remember that we could not do it. We have other CIDs throughout the city, and then if we force this development to do it, then do we then go back and force the other ones to do it after it was determined at that point that we couldn't enforce that? Councilmember Kenley and then Councilmember Constant, and then I'd like to get the audience comments.
Yeah, I have maybe some additional CID comments I'm going to hold off on just a little bit till we vote on that line item. But in regards to what Kurt was saying, I do feel like most people shopping don't realize that there is going to be an additional sales tax. And just my personal opinion, not a legal opinion, I think printing it up on a receipt after you've paid is not notice. That's after the fact. And so I think what Kurt's saying is good. I'm not a huge fan of CIDs. Part of it is I think it's a hidden tax, and part of it's because I think it's a tax as well. And so, I mean, printing on the receipt after the fact, I feel like that's not really notice.
Right.
I guess I'd like to put in my 2 cents that, or maybe 1.6 cents, 1.3, that I don't feel that that's a very business-friendly suggestion to do in Shawnee only. If the Dick's that is currently in Merriam does not have to post a sign in their door, and then they come to Shawnee and they have to post a sign, I guess I feel that we're going to struggle to attract businesses to come here if they feel, quote, punished by something, I guess, that was passed in the development agreement. I'm just thinking about the small businesses, the chamber coffees, all of the work that we do to be good, good partners with our chamber and encourage businesses big and small here. I don't know, that feels, I guess, fairly harsh on the businesses if it were not something that we saw throughout the county. It just feels like an unfair disadvantage to our city when all of the cities throughout Johnson County do not have to post similar signage.
Councilmember Thomas and then Councilmember Nappen.
I just feel like we are here on behalf of the residents. We're not here on behalf of the business. And so if residents are being charged an additional tax, I think they need to understand it prior to their purchase. What other cities do is their business, but if we're charging an additional 1.6 sales tax to purchase a pair of Nike tennis shoes for our child, I think people need to know that beforehand. We weren't hired by the city. We weren't hired by other cities. We were hired by the citizens of Shawnee. That's who we work for. That's who we represent. And I think the more transparent we can be, the more efficient we're doing our job.
Councilmember Nappen?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lindsay, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't want our businesses to be at a disadvantage. So I totally get what you're saying. I would just say that proves my point. I mean, your point proves my point, which is that this is a hidden tax. There's a reason why retailers don't want it on the front door. And so, I think we are here to take care of residents first, and our businesses absolutely a very close second. So it's just a matter of how we wear that out. But I do think that the comments prove my point that people just don't even know what this is. And by the time you get to 1.6, you are approaching 11% sales tax, which is pretty dang high. So I was just looking for a way to rectify it, to increase the transparency and feel better about moving this project forward, because I do think our residents would like to have it, but this is an issue.
Councilmember Constance and then Councilmember Zimmerman.
Just adding, I guess if we were going to go down that path, I would like to say it would make sense to engage stakeholders like the chamber. Like I said, I participate in a lot of chamber events, and our business owners are part of the community. Many of them do live in Shawnee, and there's a lot of concerns right now for small business owners throughout the state and right here in Shawnee, about how they're going to continue functioning with this economic downturn. And so before we were to do something that could feel to them as punitive, I would like to at least have it fleshed out through our Shawnee Chamber, whose job is to make sure that we're serving residents and businesses alike.
Councilmember Zimmerman.
Yes, those are all great comments. I completely understand the premise of hidden costs. Nobody likes that. But the people that voted for us told me I was running for office that they really wanted more shopping in Shawnee. And so we're trying to bring it back to Shawnee, and if we don't do that, the people that elected us to bring shopping to Shawnee are going to spend that extra $1.60 or $1.30 on a $100 purchase, and then drive over to Merriam and pay them some extra money, and in the process, burn another $2 or $3 worth of gas. That doesn't, in no way does that make hidden costs right or wrong. It's fact of life. The city of Shawnee, it's not the responsibility of the city of Shawnee to fix this issue. Maybe that belongs at the county level, or maybe that belongs at the state level. If we want to put signs in the window, and quite frankly, we'd support that. But not if it's going to compromise our city and our merchants and the people who come in and do business with us. So, Kurt, I do agree. I'm not trying to take a shot at your concept whatsoever. And I get your point, but if we don't pass this, our choice is pretty simple. We don't do this project. Then all the people in Shawnee continue to drive over to Merriam. They pay taxes to Merriam. They spend money in gas to get to Merriam. And people that wanted to get shopping here in Shawnee and elected office, I feel like they're lied to. So I think we need to kind of understand where our locus of control is, manage to that, and get on down the road.
And to that, kind of that same point too, as well as, during the retreat, it was the council's agreement, they wanted to increase our commercial tax base, to take some of the burden off of the property taxes, the residents of the city. So if we don't do that, then we're also not taking the burden off of the property tax of the residents of the city. Councilmember Thomas? Councilmember Thomas, do you have any comments, or I'm going to move on to the audience?
I'm sorry, I was muted. My family, especially during COVID, hasn't gone to Merriam or Overland Park over by over the Oak Park Mall or anything such as that. They've gone to Amazon. So where do we go from there? There's been quite the liking to Amazon during the COVID episode. So, I mean, I think we need to be transparent, and it's just, we're doing what we should be doing, and that is being totally transparent with our citizens. And some would say, well, they can jump on these calls, they can jump on, listen to these meetings that we're having, but the reality is, majority of them don't. If you just look up and down at who's joined us tonight, they're not here. But those are the people that aren't here are the people that put us in our position. And so we need to be very mindful of what we heard when we ran and what we've heard since we've been elected. And I would just like us to be very, very transparent with our citizens and let them know what's being expected of them. When they're looking at convenience versus the cost.
And I agree with that. But I think we need to get back on topic of the agenda item, because since that's not an agenda item, we're not going to take any actions or votes on that tonight. So I'd like to finish up the council members' comments on the agenda items before us. I'd like to open it up to the audience, because I know we've had people here for a long time waiting to speak. And then we'll move forward. Councilmember Kenley?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can be brief or not, but I'll try. I agree with you on what we had talked about at the council retreat about expanding the commercial tax base. However, I do want to point out that the city will not be getting their 1% sales tax on this. And so all we'll be getting is a special sales tax for parks and pipes and the roads. And we will also not be getting 90% of the property tax increase. And so while this does slightly expand the commercial tax base, it's not doing, I think, maybe the spirit of what we were talking about, at least what I was talking about on that particular item. And so I do want to keep that in mind, because the city is giving up their 1 cent on every dollar, but the taxpayer is giving up their 1.6 cents on every dollar, 60% more. And so, yes, technically on paper, this does expand the commercial tax base. However, it's not as large of a step as it could be had this been an incentivized development. Thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It will take 20 years before it really counts, but in those 20 years, we will receive 6.6 million, I think, is what it was in the special assessed tax. So that is quite a significant impact for our city. Mr. Hanson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add on as well that is correct that the city keeps the special taxes is a total of 0.625%. It is a significant amount in our view that generates first stabilized year $320,000 worth of revenue from that sales tax side, from the property tax side, even at the 10% of $30,000 per year. Significant dollars are created for the schools to the tune of $335,000 per year. So there is a partnership, there's a sharing, there's a bringing retail sales back to and a reduction of a retail sales gap that the city of Shawnee has suffered to the shopping to the Legends, to Park Mall, 119th Street in Olathe, and Merriam as well. There's a lot of competitive forces at play, and there are real dollars that flow to the city, both initially, and then very, very large dollars once the TIF and CID are repaid. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'll open it up. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item?
Hello? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is Alan Godsey from 6800 Bell Road, Shawnee, Kansas. And I am one of the neighbors who live adjacent to this project. My comments tonight really has somewhat to do with the philosophical nature of public incentives. I'm really not a fan of this concept, and there's been a lot of discussion in the past about, incentives for retail shopping and picking winners and losers and creating business segments and become dependent on this kind of thing. And, we've heard those kind of comments in the past, but this project to me also is a little bit different in that this has a fairly large residential component, has the apartments, and so now we have a residential component that will get a 90% property tax TIF, which from my point of view just furthers the shift of tax burden onto residential property owners such as myself. And again, I'm just not happy with that concept, anywhere in our city. The other thing about, that I look at when I see this project is I disagree with the idea of taking green spaces like this, which is, mostly green space, and then converting that to concrete. So, I guess kind of a final comment is I see this whole thing with public financing and, public incentives as being really, I think, a bit of an experiment, and I wonder how this is going to play out at this time, when it appears we may be, entering a recession or something along those lines. So, anyways, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item?
Yeah, Mayor and council members, this is Don Lysett. I live at 6850 Bell Road. You're probably tired of seeing me, but I can't see you, so I can't say that. I want to reiterate what I've said from day one from this project, and we all know, a lot of us know the history of that. This is not what TIF or CID was intended for. Those were supposed to be exceptional projects. This is a nice project. It's not exceptional. And I think the vast majority of people, citizens and residents, would agree to that. I want to address what I also think is a very poignant point, especially in this time of the economic situation. Mr. Jenkins made the point, and I totally concur, he actually stole a little of my thunder here. Why is the city agreeing to pay a higher percentage of this project than it needs to? You could save, if you kept your percentages at the same level, you could save approximately $3.5 million of your money, our residents' money. I don't think that's at all unreasonable. what we're doing here is essentially throwing another $3.5 million towards this development. I think you should think long and hard about that. I don't know as I want to get into the whole debate about the transparency thing, but the point that was made is dead on. People aren't going to know until after the fact we're paying that 1.6%, which is going to put right up to 11% on any purchase there, and then the city gets a pittance of that. Again, I'm going to speak personally, but I think I can also speak anecdotally for a lot of people. The city should not be involved in subsidizing these projects. If they're good enough, and let them build it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item?
That was all, Mayor Bissler.
Thank you. So now I accept a motion to conclude the public hearing.
So moved.
Okay, so Tammy moved and Matt seconded. Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The public hearing is closed. The next recommended actions consider passing ordinance number 3322, approving modifications to the Belmont Promenade CID. Does anyone on the council have questions? Mr. Kinley.
Yeah, I would like to go back to a concept that Kurt brought up a little bit earlier. And it's the idea that we've been told multiple times that this has already been approved and these are just minor changes. I do want to say that I'm not sure how many people are on this council right now that voted for the original project before there was even residential. And I would like to say that I've also been opposed to the CID on this project at every step along the way. So my opposition to it is not new or different than it's always been. And so although it's right that this project, the CID has been approved and that the changes here may be minor, I continue to not be a fan of the CID process in general or this particular CID. Thank you.
Thank you. That is correct. Thank you for your comments. I don't see any other questions, so I'll accept a motion. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
Yes, I'm sorry, just a procedural question. Did you say that we were going to be present after Dan spoke?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out.
Let me try that again. Did you say that there was going to be a separate presentation from the developers after Dan and Joe spoke?
No, sorry, I think that was it with, I believe so, with, what Mr. Hanson and Dan said. I don't, presentation.
Is it too late to ask one more question to the developers?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Really, this has been touched on a little bit in terms of the financing of the project, but I'm really thinking about the project more from a big picture perspective. Given that with the pandemic, have your thoughts potential success? And I'm kind of looking at that in two different ways. So first of all, the project will actually get built. I think you've touched on that some, but then the second question is, will there be a retail and restaurant market to support it for the foreseeable future? I could get your comments.
Councilmember, you broke up at the initial part of your question. Could you, I apologize, I caught most of the latter part, but the opening statement I missed.
Yes, I was looking through now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Have your thoughts changed potential success of this? That's two parts. A, is it going to be retail and restaurant, and I guess family residential markets to support it for the foreseeable future?
Sure. I might ask Dan to take a shot at that. He's the one that's had the most recent in-depth conversations directly with the tenants to get their perspective on where they see the market going.
Yeah, this is Dan. I appreciate the question. It's a good one, and frankly, it's one that we've been curious about as well. I have, and Heather has fielded phone calls from our tenants with whom we have signed leases nearly on a daily basis, asking us to confirm, to ensure them that the project is moving forward on the planned schedule. Not one of the tenants has suggested the notion of slowing the project down because of the pandemic. Everyone intends to open stores on schedule. We've got a Q4 2021 opening schedule, and there has not been one tenant that's reached out to us asking if we could push that. So we can only speak for what we're hearing from the the tenants with whom we have leases. We're not in the business directly, but the direct information that we're receiving from prospective tenants with whom we have leases, and frankly with whom we're speaking to about leases on the restaurant front. I mean, I had a long call with our leasing group today, who has been in communication with several restaurant groups that are looking at the restaurant plaza as an example. No one has reeled it in, so to speak. No one has expressed concerns about the restaurant market or the retail market rebounding. So again, we can only work off of the information that we're receiving directly from the retailers, and they're all absolutely committed to moving forward.
Councilmember Nappen?
I just wanted to add on, I don't know that anyone knows what the result of COVID will be, but if I'm not mistaken, there was a study done by a third party regarding this location, and it determined that there's absolutely capacity for restaurants in Shawnee still, and I'm not surprised at all. That's why everybody wants more. But I know prior to COVID-19, a study was done for this site, and it showed demand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Councilmember. There's tremendous demand here. There is a huge void in this market, primarily for sit-down, full-service restaurants, and those are the types of restaurants with whom we're having the most discussion. Certainly, over the last 30 days, there have been a lot of interest from drive-through restaurants, and we do have a spot for a drive-through restaurant in the project, but our restaurant plaza area does contemplate sit-down restaurants, and we're having very prolific discussions with sit-down restaurants about that area. So you're right, there's definitely a void, at least in the restaurateurs' minds and eyes.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I will accept a motion to consider passing ordinance number 3322, approving the modifications to the Belmont Promenade CID.
Move to pass ordinance number 3323.
Okay, moved by Matt Zimmerman.
Wait, this is 22, isn't it, not 23?
3322.
Sorry, 33. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, approved by
22.
Matt Zimmerman. Seconded by Jill Chaffee. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, who was that?
Eric's nay.
Michael Kinley.
Amy Thomas. Okay, so 5-3, motion passes. See. The next recommended action is consider passing ordinance number 3323, levying the CID special assessments related to Belmont Promenade. Does anyone on the council have any questions? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
By Matt Zimmerman. Second. Who seconded? Jill Chaffee. Joe Chaffee seconded. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
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 That was Kimling and Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes. The next recommended action is to consider passing ordinance number 3324, approving the second amended and restated redevelopment agreement related to Belmont Promenade. Does anyone on the council have any questions? I will accept a motion.
So moved.
By Matt, seconded by, was that Joe Chaffee again? No, Lisa. Seconded by Lisa. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Final recommended actions considered passing ordinance number 3325, authorizing the issuance of the bonds and execution of certain bond documents related to the Belmont Promenade development. Does anyone on the council have any questions?
Move approve.
Second. Approved by Matt Zimmerman. Who was the second? Lindsay. Lindsay. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Tammy Thomas in dissent. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is from the Planning Commission meeting on April 6, 2020. Item number 1 is to consider ordinance number 3326, D022004, rezoning from planned development to single-family residential for the Strendon residence located at 13855 West 67th Street. Planning Commission recommended 11-0 that the governing body approve D022004. Recommended actions consider passing ordinance number 3326. Does anyone on the council have any questions? I will accept a motion.
Eric moves to approve.
Second. Tammy seconded. Eric motioned. A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is staff items. Item number 1 is to consider approving substantive terms of supplemental agreement number 1, contract number 2019-075 with Strata Architecture, Inc. for the design of a period replication of Dr. Sullivan's house at Shawneetown 1929. The project is included in the 2020-2029 Capital Improvement Program and the Strategic Plan for Shawneetown 1929. Dr. Sullivan's house is the next building scheduled for construction at the museum. On April 13, 2020, the governing body rejected bids for the relocation of an existing home due to the estimated cost. The next step is to work with the architect on the design of a period replication of Dr. Sullivan's house. A supplemental agreement with Strata is required for a revised contract amount of $73,650. This project is funded from the Special Park and Recreation Fund, which is funded by a portion of the liquor sales tax and a donation from the Friends of Shawneetown. And I think Charlie Potler of Shawneetown 1929 had some comments. And then I will recognize Councilmember Knappen and then Councilmember Jason.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, Ms. Mayor and members of the City Council, it's a pleasure to be here. I was asked this afternoon to answer some questions that there might be. I guess I'll just talk a little bit about Doc Sullivan House project. We are looking at now reconstructing Doc Sullivan's house. After the last year, we were looking at relocating an original house because one of the functions of a museum is not only preservation of the collections but preservation of the historic buildings. And we had an opportunity avail itself after some time of planning. The strategic plan was adopted back in 2016. So by last year, early 2019, a family had come forward and they said, we have a house that we hope you're interested in. So I figured it would be in our best interest to at least check it out. So I did, and I brought our historic architect with us, who's worked on several projects for the city of Shawnee, and we were both very impressed with it. It was offered to us free of charge. The house was in very good shape, but in the end, and I'll make this very short, the relocation cost proved to be too high. It was about $75,000 out of our budget. And we are a very fiscally responsible organization, and it just wasn't in the cards to make it happen. So we had the historic architect, Strata Architecture, had gone in and done some extensive plans to that they needed to do anyway for the relocation. So we figured we would use that house as the inspiration for the reconstructed house that would fall in budget at the museum. So that is kind of the direction that we are looking to take this project right now. I want to give you just a little bit of background on Doc Sullivan. The reason why we want to have a house in the town part of Shawneetown is to compare and contrast what the rural experience was compared to the city experience. I use city with quotes because it was a town of 550 people proper in the 1920s. So as visitors would go through Doc Sullivan's house, he was a prominent physician in town. He delivered every baby in town. He and his wife, they had 3 children, and they were just very pivotal movers and shakers in town, but yet they lived in a very quaint, small house. But yet, because it was in town, they had modern conveniences. They had electricity, they had running water, they had toilets, that kind of thing. So we will be able to give the visitors an experience and for them to be able to see what life was like for an urban dweller in Shawnee back in 1929 compared to the way it was out in the farmscape. So that's the direction that we would like to head with this project. We are still working with Strata Architecture. They are kind of our friend and our partner in this. And the direction that we're headed. Oh, I also want to mention we are getting a lot of lumber and architectural elements, windows, doors, a lot of the historical trim that would ordinarily cost a ton of money. We are getting that free, basically, because it's coming out of a period house that now belongs to the city. And I don't know a whole lot about that project, but the house was offered to us, and we will be able to save a substantial amount of money by using those historical elements. So I think those are it. I guess I didn't know exactly what questions there were going to be. So I think that's where I'll leave it. That's kind of the process of the project right now. We would like to reconstruct the house. Oh, the one other thing I was going to tell you, it's kind of interesting that we're on this topic right now because today, and I go in every day and check the facility, check the locks, check the gates, make sure everything's running correctly, and I do chicken chores when I'm there. So I had a voicemail, and I returned the call, and it happened to be Doc Sullivan's daughter. She actually happened to call me today, and kind of fortuitous. Her name is Jane Sullivan, and she is looking for historic photographs and other ephemera that belong to the family so that we can make it as authentic as possible. So our mission starts with research. That's where it started over 10 years ago to reconstruct Shawneetown 1929. And like any responsible organization that handles public funds, we started before we built one stick of furniture, before we built one wall. We started with research, and we started with planning, and we started with a strategic plan. And that's the Doc Sullivan's house is in the strategic plan. It's been in the plan since 2016, once the plan was adopted by the city council. So that's kind of where we are right now. We are just trying to bring the strategic plan to fruition and develop the site, develop the museum, so that we can attract even more visitors. And our visitation has gone up. I know a couple of weeks ago when I tried to give the storyboard, the story map presentation on the town and on the museum, I was cut short because of technology. But I did lot of supplementary information that I think was given to you. So I guess I can open it for questions now.
Councilmember Nappen, and then Councilmember Jenkins, and then Councilmember Chelsea.
Yeah, Charlie, thank you for the presentation, and I applaud you and Neil for making a responsible decision and go ahead and pull the plug on the relocation based on the cost. So the projected costs, as I read them, are $480,000 on the reconstruction. I know it looks like Friends of Shawnee Town are looking at putting in $100,000. At least that was the 2019 funding source. Wasn't on the 2020, but I assume it's the same. So far, I just want to note, I believe we've only spent about $47,000 allocated for the consulting on this. And so the current request is not for a lot more. It's another $26,000. But, so I realize we're not asking for the $480,000 tonight, but we are being asked to continue to march down this path. And I can't in good conscience vote in favor of going forward on a $480,000 house. I mean, I appreciate the history of Shawnee, and I'm supportive of Shawnee Town and all that you're doing. But I think it's worth noting that there's already about 22 houses down there. And I was having a little trouble with it anyway, but given the COVID conditions and the fact that the neighboring cities are currently furloughing, at least one big one is furloughing employees, it seems irresponsible to me to move forward on funding for this house in 2020. Maybe not always, but until we find out what the financial ramifications are. So, just a couple of comments from my perspective. I'm not unsupportive. I worry a lot about the financial situation of the city right now and the need to move on this right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Can I go ahead and answer that now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I certainly appreciate your point of view, and I realize we're in the middle of a pandemic that we've never experienced before. This is new territory for all of us. I would like to talk a little bit about where this money comes from. It does not come from the general fund. This comes from a special liquor fund and I'm going to read just the official wording. It's a special revenues fund, comes from the Special Park and Recreation Fund, which is funded by a portion of the liquor sales tax. And this is the state law. The funds may only be used for the purchase, establishment, maintenance, or expansion of park and recreational services, programs, and facilities. And that's pretty much what we've used to build the brick and mortar part of Shawneetown Museum. You had mentioned the Friends of Shawneetown. They have agreed to come forward with $100,000 towards the interior finishes. That means everything from the flooring to carpet to the artifacts that go inside, some of the window trim, the locks, the lights, that kind of thing. So the $480,000, that is the budget. That's not necessarily what the building costs, and that's based on the size of the building times, and I believe, and stop me if I'm wrong here, Neil, but about $300 a square foot cost, which is the modern cost of what it takes to build these replica buildings. So that's where some of those numbers are coming from. But it's not, the funding for this project is not coming from the general fund. It's coming from this very special tax revenue that is to be used for parks. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may, Parks and Recreation Director, thank you, Mayor. Now this is, again, please, this is two projects. This is a sewer extension for 3 future buildings, and this is the building of the house, which is 390, which we don't, I mean, the 390 is included in the sewer extension, but we're not, we feel that that's a good, I mean, remember, we're not going to spend all that. So, and we'd like to, if it goes out to bid, then, we're not looking at the 480, I know that's a total, but we've done some other things with that. But right now it's 390, but that, again, it's still 2 projects in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Neil, just to confirm, is it 390 because Friends of Shawnee town is kicking in 100,000?
No. I wish that, the memo, transparency and all that, the 100,000 is for tile, hardwood floors, the light fixtures, that we have never paid for that. So let's just, if we could please, let's pull that out. That's for stuff that brings the building to life. This is stuff that will bring, this is what we pay for is the bricks and mortar, the walls, that give you the shell, if you will. But this also has a sewer extension that will do, this will also do the Heart Home, but it will also do down the road, the Trail Cafe, the Town Hall, and then the soda fountain, hopefully down the road when we do the 4 buildings. So there's other buildings that are attached onto this that we have to have this sewer extension.
Thank you, Neil. So next we have Councilmember Jenkins, then Councilmember Chowthy, then Councilmember Thomas.
This is Councilmember Jenkins, and my questions may be somewhat answered. I was just wondering when we looked at this whole thing, because I know we had all this momentum going with the Doc Sullivan house, and that was where our sights were set on that, and it was this house in Old Shawnee Town. Well, that fell through because of the cost and so on, so I was just contemplating to myself, like, well, is that the next building we want to build? We still want to go with the house, or now that we got a chance to kind of hit the restart button, maybe we want to consider doing some other part of the strategic plan? I'm just kind of wondering. It's a wonderful opportunity to change our mind and build something else first if we were so inclined. And that's kind of where I was coming from, and just I think we've kind of boxed ourselves in on Doc Sullivan. Maybe that's where we want to go. I'm not opposed to anything necessarily, but I am looking at an opportunity to hit the pause button, think things through, and gee whiz, do we really want to continue with the house, or do we want to build that soda shop, or do we want to do something else for now? So just throwing that out there, and if you have any comments on that, Charlie or Neely.
Sure, I'd be happy to comment on that. The reason why we're continuing with Doc Sullivan is because we've already expended some dollars with our historic architect, and so we're a little bit ahead of the game actually on that. She doesn't have to create plans from scratch. So using the other house as the inspiration for this, she's drawn some pretty good plans, and we're just going to try and capitalize on that. The other buildings after this, or if we put a pause on this, the next 4 buildings would include the soda shop. So that would be Heaton's Drug Store, the electric store, which is a building where you would buy electric appliances, the drug store, the dry goods shop, and the Shawnee State Bank. And to try and replicate some of that architecture and the city block down, which is now at Mize Road and Johnson Drive. So that is a much larger project, and that is one where we're still raising money for that. That is, we're going to try and match the amount of money that we have for the liquor tax fund with donations and fundraising, so through a capital campaign. So Neil and I are the ones doing that. But the money for Doc Sullivan's, and Neil, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is money in the budget here, the 480, that's money that we already have through the liquor tax fund. It's already there.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. We need to get our adult beverage establishments opened again, because we're not getting a lot of tax on for you on that.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah. So the 4 buildings that would be the next buildings, and then we also have the amphitheater that would be in the field. So that would round out a lot of Shawnee Town. So there's a lot of neat things that are coming down the pike through the strategic plan that's been approved. So, it's exciting. And it will put us on the map for a outdoor museum that is, very professional staff. And that's why attendance is going up. We've, and Charlie, I don't know if said anything, but, we've also got, through this, we do a lot of, school groups, and that's where our biggest attendance jump has been. But, we've been asked from a school, and Charlie can definitely chime in on this, please, but, a school from Wisconsin. So I think staff's doing a great job on promoting and the educational value of this museum. It's just fantastic that when you have a school from Wisconsin that wants to do a virtual tour of the museum and actually do a tour. So that's what Charlie and staff are working on now is looking at with other things. Hopefully trying to create a virtual tour for the schools that are states away from that can't come to a field trip. So I don't know, Charlie, you got anything to answer or add to that?
Always. We're starting to see reaping the benefits of the investment that we've made, that the city's made into our staffing. And I have 5 people on my staff with master's degrees in museum work and history and historic preservation. And we're starting to really see that return on investment in the fact that our attendance is going up. And the story map I showed a couple weeks ago, I don't know if we got to that point yet, but the trajectory has gone upward the last 4 years. And we're starting to see a lot of interest from groups outside of the Kansas City metro area. Now, Shawnee is where we tell our story, and we focus on Shawnee, but Shawnee is a mirror of the rest of the Midwest. And, we were this food center. We were a food distribution center. We grew it here, and it went out to Denver and Chicago and St. Paul. That's an exciting story that word is getting out. So, as Neil alluded to, I was contacted by a school in Wisconsin, and we're starting to do long-distance learning. And some of our educators on the city council, I think you might be interested, we're reaching out to audiences that will never be able to physically come to the museum and see us through a virtual experience. So Jenny, our newest member of our staff, she's been with us about a year. She has worked with our IT department to set up a station in the farmhouse, and it's going to be about a 40-minute classroom experience done remotely up at our farmstead. So, and we're also getting some recognition. I just got an email today, actually from, we're going to be in the official Tour Kansas, I don't have the Kansas official travel guide for 2021. We're going to be a prominent feature in that travel guide. So we're attracting tourism from really all over the Midwest. That's my goal, and that was the goal of the strategic plan, was to get visitors coming from not only Kansas City, but about an hour in a big circle outside. So we're starting to see some of those rewards.
Hey, Charlie, when we do those virtual classes, do we charge, like we do with attendance, admittance when they come on site?
That will be the eventual goal, Ms. Mayor. This first one was an experiment, and unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we had to cancel that. So that's where we are headed. Yeah, is to get more revenue that way while providing a quality educational experience. Another thing we had to cancel during COVID-19 was we were embarking on our first shared coach tour with Mahaffey Farmstead down in Olathe, and bringing in coach tourism. I've been working with Kevin Fern. Really, Kevin and I have been talking about this since I got here, and bringing in coach tours, usually adults and seniors, and they hit 1 or 2 cultural sites in Kansas City, and then they have lunch at a facility. I want to get them here at Shawneetown for lunch, and then tour the site, and then they go to another facility. So we were going to have the first one of those. It was actually supposed to happen today, but of course we had to cancel it. So we're doing a lot more than the traditional school program and traditional tour that you see at most traditional museums.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we have Councilmember Chaffee, then Councilmember Thomas, Councilmember Knappen, and then Councilmember Constance.
Thank you. I have a couple comments and then one quick clarification. First, I just think it's really cool, a lot of the things that you just talked about. Really cool that Doc Sullivan's daughter contacted you today, and I think those family photos will be a great addition. But I love the ideas about the virtual tours and all the things that you just talked about were great. My kids and I actually were in downtown the other day dropping something off, and we did a drive-by and waved at the chickens. So we are excited to get back. The one thing I wanted to clarify just on the financials, it looks like, and I think I'm understanding this correctly, that by looking at this chart in the packet, that the money, we're not allocating any additional money overall. It's just that it's changed categories a little bit. And that what we're really approving tonight is an additional $25,800 for additional design services for the design of the house, which those designs we would have moving forward. So even if for some reason we hit pause on this at some point, we have the designs. So am I correct in that?
That is correct. We are not asking for $25,000 additional dollars. We were going to take it from within the existing budget.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like everyone dropped their hands, but Councilmember Constance.
Quick comment and question for Charlie. I really love the virtual museum opportunities you're providing children. If I have seen you do your storytelling with students, and if you would like to practice any of that virtual storytelling with Shawnee Mission students, I would love to get you set up even in May. So I think that would be a really cool opportunity to be able to Zoom with kids and tell stories. I know that when you visited our school, they really loved it. So thanks for doing that and getting kids excited. And if you want to practice on our students, just let me know.
Okay. I will practice on your kids. I mean students.
You're doing 32. I want an invitation too.
Okay.
Thomas?
You can do it via Zoom.
I want to know why there's not an RFP. Why is it strictly the strata architecture?
We did go through a RFQ process. We held on to that for 3 years. We did do one with all the other buildings. The historic architectural, there's actually only 2 roughly in Kansas City. One we got from Wichita, and we did a proper RFQ process, and Strata was selected, and then with their knowledge of the other buildings, and just the knowledge of Kansas City that they do around, we stuck with Strata.
So why are we paying $73,000 if we stuck with Strata?
Well, and I don't know if this works on the line. I mean, we went down the road of the moving the house, and now that
Right.
Okay, then we went to designing the house, which is a little bit more. I mean, some of that is we have some of that done, but then you need the window details, the roof details, the structure details, and so that's where the 25 comes in.
And so,
and I think Bert's on the line. He may be able to answer more of that.
Square footage of this house?
I'm sorry,
you think?
Remind me the square footage of this home?
What was it, 1,100? The square footage? 12 foot, or 1,200? What is the square footage? Charlie?
I believe it's about 1,200 square feet, yes.
Yeah.
1,200, so a very small house, really. And so how much revenue, and if I'm understanding correctly, there's been no revenue generation by attendance. Is that correct?
You mean in general or this spring?
By the school kids coming and all that kind of thing. Is there a fee that's paid, or I don't know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have a fee structure, and we charge $5 for adults, $4 for seniors, children 5 to 17 are $3, and then under 5 is free. So we've had a fee structure for probably the last 10 years, and we just upped our fees very slightly within the last 4 months. So you're right.
Is the virtual tour charged as well?
As Michelle asked, we have not yet, because we were going to do our first one this spring, and that was going to be an experiment to see how it went. But museums that are advanced and have done this for a while, they do charge for their virtual tours, and it is a revenue source.
Okay, so as a lover of antiques myself and an owner of a turn-of-the-century home, we're talking about $480,000 for a 1,200 square foot home?
That is the budget for it. We don't anticipate to spend every bit of that. So that is the budget for everything. For the water line that Neil mentioned, that is going to serve, that's going to extend from Town Hall all the way down to the soda fountain, and then also extend to this building. So this is coming out of, that water line is coming out of this.
Okay.
And then the sewer line, this building, and then, the sewer line. And then this building, because it's a reconstruction and it's at a public facility, it needs to have a commercial load-bearing roof on it. So that's a additional fee that we would not have had to pay, if we would have brought in an original building. So there are some additional fees with a reconstruction.
Can I ask you another question? How much money did we spend on the bid for moving the other house in South Overland Park?
Bert, would you happen to have that number? Okay, I don't have that number right here, but I can search for it and I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you. One other question. Something that seems to be missing in Old Shawneetown, I'd like to hear a little bit about the plan, and that is a church. When I've been in Old Shawneetown, I've not seen a church, and I know there's an original church not that far from Old Shawneetown that was actually an African-American church at the time that is still standing, and faith seems to, it is a significant presence in the history of Shawnee. If we think about it, just to, if you're standing in Old Shawneetown, to the left, there's a church. Right across the street, there's a church. Do we have any kind of plan to bring a church to Old Shawneetown, which could be a significant revenue producer with the kind of weddings that are taking place this day and age in Old Shawneetown?
Well, we're actually Shawneetown 1929,
right.
And we do have a revenue source for weddings and receptions and parties, and that's our town hall facility.
Mm-hmm. But that's not a church. I guess I'm questioning Shawnee Mission was a mission. That was a faith mission, and we don't have a church represented or a faith-based example or representation in Old Shawneetown. I guess I'm questioning. I'm questioning. My question is, what type of church are we? Is there a plan for? I understand there's the town hall thing, but that's not a church. What are we doing with regard to a church?
In regard to a church, there is not a plan for it in our strategic plan, because there are our church community, our religious community in Shawnee is very wide and deep and diverse, and that's one of the beautiful things about it in Shawnee. Back in 1929, there was pretty much one religion in Shawnee, and that was Roman Catholicism. And now there are so many other religions out there that practice actively in Shawnee, our spiritual leaders, our church leaders do a beautiful job of reaching their audiences and delivering those religious messages and being that beacon of hope for our society. That's not something that is the role of city government to provide when we have so many wonderful partners out there in our religious community.
But if we're representing what Shawnee was in 1929, it was the faith was a significant presence within our city, and I really want to know, it's not about stepping on somebody's toes, it's about representing what this was in 1929, it seems.
Yeah,
so not to get away from the whole thing, $73,000 seems like a lot of money, especially in our climate that we're in financially due to COVID and within our own state. I'm sure you know that we're expected to, over the next 15 months, have a loss of $1.3 billion in tax revenue. So, I question this, but as we move forward with Old Shawneetown, faith is a significant contributor to what Shawnee is today, and it's represented by what surrounds Old Shawneetown. You've got the First Baptist Church of Shawnee, you've got St. Joe Church right across the street. It seems like a logical step.
And I think you've just described exactly why we don't need a church at Shawneetown, because our churches that are right around there and throughout the entire city of Shawnee, they answer that call and they provide spiritual leadership for our citizens. So I don't want to compete with them. I don't want to step on their toes. They have been very good about working with us at Old Shawnee Days and some of our huge community events. I don't think that needs to be in our strategic plan.
Okay, I hope you reconsider, because I see it as a vital piece of our history. Thank you.
And Ms. Thomas, I would agree, and I am adamant that we reconsider this in the future. Point being that faith has always been a part of the city of Shawnee, and I don't believe the chapel needs to represent any faith. And I go around the country, and every place I go that has one of these types of museums, I go there. So I've been to the one in Lawrence, which has 2 or 3 chapels. I've been to the one in Missouri Town, which has 2 or 3 chapels. The one in West Des Moines, Iowa, had 3 chapels. We used to have a chapel in Shawneetown, and the oldest church standing in the city of Shawnee was built in the 1800s, right there by City Hall. It's a 1-room, beautiful little white church. It was an African-American church, but I think we can have a chapel that does not represent any faith or religion and bring that back for the sake of those who like to use Shawneetown for their weddings and their photography and their gatherings and all of that. And so it is something that I feel very strongly about as well. So I do want to discuss this with our future strategic plan. Absolutely.
Agreed. Mayor, I just want to jump in. You go to some large, very large organizations within our country that are multi-million-dollar players, and they have a chapel within their city settings. One of them is in Branson, Missouri. They have a chapel that is absolutely stunning. Many weddings take place there each year, and faith is a significant part of Shawnee. It was founded on that Shawnee mission. That is a huge player and a huge contributor to where we are today. At this point in time, to spend $73,000 on a design of an 11 or 1,200 square foot home seems absurd, when I don't even see an RFP to compare it to. And maybe that's because I'm new on the council, but wanting to avoid the statement of faith is concerning in the broader picture.
And like I said, I don't remember visiting any living museum that does not have at least one, but most of them have 3 chapels. Councilmember Kimling and then Councilmember Zimmerman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have lowered my hand, Mayor. You said it better than I could have, so that's good. I agree. I concur with what you said and what Councilmember Thomas said.
Okay, Councilmember Zimmerman. Councilmember Zimmerman?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
having audio issues. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, those are all great comments, but, just to make a process check here, I kind of feel like we derailed ourselves a little bit. We have a museum, issue here. This is part of the master plan that's been going on for quite some time. These are great comments about the church chapel and all of that, but I think that needs to go to the committee that's in charge of the museum and pick it up with those people. Right now, Shawnee Town it's on the move. Things are picking up. We're getting interest from other states around the country. This particular project has been on the master plan for the museum for quite some time. Charlie indicated it's going to be a prominent feature in an upcoming tour guide. I mean, this feels like we are in motion here. Shawnee Town is a main attraction to the growing hub of commerce in what's going to be our revitalized downtown area. $25,800 for a consulting fee includes money for the sewage pipe design. This is not a house; it's a museum. It's got commercial requirements, structural commercial requirements that come with a fair amount of risk management mitigation on behalf of the design and the architect. I don't think we can compare it to a house. So back to the process check, and it is 10:15. Let's take this church thing. Let's take it to the museum's board and get it in front of them so they can act on it. And then let's do something with what's on the docket here right now. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I will accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. So the move to approve was Eric. Who seconded?
Lindsay?
Okay. Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Motion passes. Oh, Councilmember Constance, did you have a comment?
I was just motioning.
Oh, sorry. Where are we? Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items. Item number 1 is to ratify the semi-monthly claims for April 27, 2020 in the amount of $3,265,499.16. Is there any discussion from the council?
Move approved.
Second. Motion by Matt, second by Lindsay. Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Miscellaneous council items. Does anyone on the council have an item they would like to discuss?
Yes.
Councilmember Nappen?
Yeah, so 2 things. Number 1, I just want to get on the record the last vote. You didn't call out who were the nays, and I think it was Ms. Thomas and me.
I was a nay, correct, Kurt?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not hear any nays. Okay, so Councilmember Nappen and Councilmember Thomas.
And Kimley.
And
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Was there another one?
Councilmember Kimley, Nappen, and Thomas. Thank you, I did not hear that.
Okay. Secondly, I just have one item. I received an update, Nolan, from on our pools. The plan right now is to open one, and just want to, obviously we don't know how this COVID situation is going to continue. I understand the concerns about social distancing moving forward. I just want to state that if at all possible, I know that the plan is to possibly even close that one pool. I think the longer this thing goes on, the more, I think our parks and our recreation have been the highlight for everyone's day. And so if we can, even if we have to limit the number of people into the pools, if we can find a way to keep one pool open this year, I would encourage it. The second question I had around that was, is there any guidance to HOAs regarding their pools during this time? And then finally, could we maybe get an update at a future, soon at a future council meeting around our plan for how we're going to handle this? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Nolan. Just a quick response. not been finalized yet, so we are still kind of working on a final plan and kind of what that looks like in terms of pool scheduling, staff availability, lifeguarding, social distancing. The county, Johnson County should be kind of coming out with their kind of reopening plan and different phasing and what that looks like, along with the potential for a stay-at-home order to be extended or expire. We're still not sure kind of the direction that will go. So there's a lot of things kind of still up in the air in terms of what that scheduling opportunity looks like and what will happen with our pool facilities. So a lot of things still moving in terms of the HOA pools. I think we can look at some direction, see kind of what, again, kind of what the county is going to be recommending. Again, just trying to preface that a stay-at-home order is different than social distancing, and there's a lot of different things that really kind of play into this. And then obviously even with our public pools, just the number of staff that are needed and training and those sort of things. So Neil and Tanya and Sean are doing a lot of work and coordination, not just kind of what the impact is for us, but then also working with other park facilities in Johnson County and actually across the metro. So a lot of different things kind of going into those decisions. Looking at doing kind of another COVID update. I think at the next city council meeting, I believe May 11th. So we'll hopefully kind of have a better idea kind of on where things stand at that point. And then kind of hitting a few highlights for you all, just in terms of updates from the city, in terms of, events, pools, kind of the city facility kind of reopening phase, and kind of what that plan looks like. Again, as I've mentioned, I kind of heard the phrase, kind of looking at this in terms of a turning the dial approach, not necessarily a light switch approach. And so city staff are putting together, kind of a reopening plan for city facilities as well. So we've seen, a few drafts have kind of come out on the county plan, and so we're looking at that. But I think they're trying to get that finalized in the next day or two to present that to the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. So.
All right, I agree, completely understand, look forward to the next update. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Thomas?
This is for Nolan. Hey, Nolan, how close are we to coming on a lessons learned for Neiman now? I've had several calls in the past, 2-3 weeks. People asking that question, so I know that we had talked about that you were preparing something. How are we coming on that?
Yeah, so waiting for the project to get wrapped up so we can do kind of a full, complete kind of lessons learned once the project's finished.
Okay. I mean, just like COVID, the way COVID's been handled, good or bad or whatever you think. I mean, people, there will be a COVID review. I think it's already in progress, but I think Neiman Now will be appreciated to have a review of Neiman Now.
Okay, if there are no other items, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded by Mr. Knappen. The motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you. Goodbye.
You're not